Let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Liz Truss assembles her cabinet as she prepares for her first Prime Minister's questions later today.
A very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of September. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Thank you for your company. Newly appointed Prime Minister Liz Truss will chair the first meeting of her new cabinet this morning. Amongst those in attendance will be her new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, Home Secretary Suella Braverman and Foreign Secretary James Cleverly.
Well, it comes as she prepares to go head-to-head with Sir Keir Starmer for the first time today during Prime Minister's questions at midday.
Shares in British hospitality and retail businesses rose in wake of Ms Truss's appointment ahead of an announcement on an energy support package which is predicted tomorrow.
When we're talking about cost of living in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has announced a rent freeze for both social and private tenants until March of next year. In her speech announcing the policy, she said the cost of living crisis was a humanitarian emergency.
Well, what do you think? Because that's what it's all about. We are the People's Channel, and you can join in any of our discussions, usual ways. You know how to email, you know how to tweet as well. Love to hear from you. Okay, good morning to you. Here we go. Liz Truss, goodness me, she has been busy since being appointed Prime Minister. She'll chair the first cabinet meeting later this morning.
Well, following her speech outside Downing Street yesterday, which she just managed to avoid the downpours, several key appointments were revealed, including Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor, and James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary.
So here's a reminder of how her first day unfolded from our political reporter, Catherine Forster.
After a 7-week leadership contest, the moment had come for Boris Johnson to resign as Prime Minister. But not before one final performance outside number 10.
This is it, folks. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now.
He also hinted at a possible return to high office, comparing himself to Cincinnatus, the Roman statesman called out of retirement to lead the people again.
Like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough, and I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support.
Boris Johnson said he would back Liz Truss and urged the Conservative Party to unite, comparing them to the age-old fight between cats and dogs, using his dog Dylan and Downing Street cat Larry as examples.
And I know that Liz Truss and this compassionate Conservative government will do everything we can to get people through this crisis, and this country will endure it, and we will win. If Dylan and Larry can put behind them their occasional difficulties, then so can the Conservative Party.
After the speech, some of the Prime Minister's most loyal allies shared hugs and souvenir snaps. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie then boarded a plane from RAF Northolt in West London to Balmoral. And it was in Her Majesty's Green Drawing Room that Boris Johnson met Her Majesty and offered his formal resignation. Next, it was the turn of new leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister-elect Liz Truss to board a plane to Scotland. After landing, she was driven to Balmoral for her audience with the Queen and was asked to form a government. It's not the first time she's met Her Majesty, but a private audience will have been a unique experience for her. Liz Truss is the 15th Prime Minister to serve the Queen. Back to Downing Street, and next came the big speech of the day. Liz Truss addressing the nation as Prime Minister for the first time.
Let me pay tribute to my predecessor. Boris Johnson delivered Brexit, the COVID vaccine, and stood up to Russian aggression. History will see him as a hugely consequential Prime Minister.
Truss acknowledged the huge issues facing the UK and pledged to focus on the economy, energy and the NHS.
We shouldn't be daunted by the challenges we face. As strong as the storm may be, I know that the British people are stronger. Our country was built by people who get things done. We have huge reserves of talent, of energy and determination. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm.
Now the nation watches and waits to see how Prime Minister Truss will address the challenging weeks and months that lie ahead. Catherine Forster, GB News.
OK, we go live now to Downing Street. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, we believe lives there. I'm not sure he's even left Downing Street from yesterday. But yesterday was yesterday. What's going to happen today, Tom?
Yes, it does feel like I could set up a tent on this street at this point, but it is yet another day of drama here in Downing Street. Of course, we have seen quite a lot of action through the last 48 hours, but it is not over yet. Last night, the Cabinet was appointed, of course, ahead of this morning's Cabinet meeting, but there are still lots of junior ministerial ranks to fill. That's something that will be taking up some of Liz Truss's time this morning. Not just that, of course, but chairing her first Cabinet meeting, pushing on with that policy agenda. We hear, of course, that there is expected to be this announcement on energy bills as soon as tomorrow. That means that there could be quite a lot to chew over in that Cabinet meeting this morning. And, of course, preparing for Prime Minister's questions at midday today, it's a pretty full in-tray for the new Prime Minister, who cast herself really as an action woman yesterday afternoon, taking to the podium in a brief respite from the rain, saying that she is someone who will get things done, that the country is built by people who get things done, and that this government will be one that is focused on action. It will be a tough challenge to push through all of the action that she desires, given the myriad crises that the country faces right now. But it's interesting to see the makeup of her cabinet, a cabinet of loyalists, a cabinet of individuals who have been strongly by her side, really, since she entered Parliament over a decade ago. A new Deputy Prime Minister who has been one of her closest allies, a new Chancellor who has been one of her closest allies, and some new faces too entering Cabinet for the first time. We will soon be seeing these individuals walking down Downing Street again and having that meeting a little later this morning. But yes, a busy in-tray for the new Prime Minister.
And a reshuffled cabinet, Tom. Just talk us through any of the surprise announcements, because quite a lot of the posts before, we knew, didn't we, she's going to put some of her favourites in those positions.
Yes, this was a relatively predictable cabinet reshuffle. We'd seen a lot of the names and a lot of the hints as to who was going to get which job in the days beforehand. The great offices of state, the Chancellor, the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary, they were all predictable. We saw, of course, Kwasi Kwarteng becoming the Chancellor, Suella Braverman becoming the Home Secretary, and James Cleverly becoming the Foreign Secretary. Similarly, too, it was widely reported that Therese Coffey would become the new Deputy Prime Minister. Perhaps some of the surprises in the mix were some of these new MPs. So Ranil Jayawardena was a Member of Parliament elected in 2015, not well known, but he had served as a minister in the Trade Department. He's the new DEFRA Secretary, the Department for Food, Environment, Rural Affairs. Also Wendy Morton, the first female Chief Whip in the history of that role. So there are some new names in and amongst the mix. Also Chris Philp entering Cabinet for the first time as Chief Secretary to the Treasury. But overall, this was a fairly predictable reshuffle, one that went by the book, one that promoted loyalists, and one that really did not have much space for anyone who supported Rishi Sunak. No big job offered to Liz Truss's main rival here in the Conservative leadership contest.
Yeah, no position for Sunak or any of his supporters, as you say. Tom, thank you very much. Stationed for us, as Eamonn said, almost permanently, it seems, outside number 10.
Well, for more reaction on all this, let's bring in the deputy editor of the political publication CapEx, and that's Alice Denby, friend of the show. Good to see you again, Alice.
Good to be back.
Alice, this we were talking about the cabinet, we're talking about who's in it, what she has assembled there. Is that a cabinet to win an election?
Well, I think the key thing that she's got to do, she's only got 2 years, so she needs to deliver. And I think she's decided to put people around her who are going to share her vision, who are going to force through her agenda above perhaps party loyalty, above trying to bring in some more Sunakites and make a bigger offer. She might put some of those people in the lower ministerial ranks, but really what she's done here is put people around her who are going to force through her agenda. And I think if she's got any chance of winning in 2024, she's going to need to have something to show for these 2 years, and I think that was the right decision.
So, is that the most right-wing cabinet we've had in a while?
Yeah, these are certainly people. I mean, if you look at the backgrounds of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng back in the day, wrote this book, Britannia Unchained, about sort of free markets and shrinking the state. I think her chief policy advisor has also written a book about how to, roll back the state. So yeah, I think this is a cabinet committed to free market ideas.
Mm-hmm. One of the criticisms has been in her cabinet. She has filled it with her supporters, and one of the real challenges she's going to have is reuniting the Conservative Party, and she hasn't got any of the other side in that loyal team. Do you think that's going to be difficult then to say we are working as one when she's only really picked one side to work alongside her?
I think it's a risk. As you say, her victory, her margin of victory wasn't as big as many expected. Sunak had a lot more MPs on his side. So I think it's a risk, but I think the gamble that she's taken is that she needs to deliver by 2024. She doesn't have a long time to do it.
She hasn't got time for in-house fighting.
Exactly. And the Tory party, if there's one thing that unites them, it's an election, it's winning an election. And there's some key polling that's been done by the Centre for Policy Studies that shows that the majority, the route to an election is no longer what we might have used to have called the just about managing. It's the working classes who are leaving the party in their droves. These are the people who are going to suffer the most in the immediate future. I think that's why we're going to see this big promise on energy pledges, but also a kind of longer-term agenda around fairness and patriotism and people with and it's not about redistribution. This is what she was talking about in her leadership campaign. It's about fairness.
When it comes to the polling, do you think the public think 2024 we could re-elect the Conservatives?
I think that very much depends on what happens this winter. I mean, people are going to feel poorer, they're going to feel pain, and by 2024 they need to have something to show that their lives are going to be better in the future. So it really depends on what she can do, and she doesn't have long to do it.
Well, all of which depends on, I suppose, Ukraine and Russia. She's made a statement. Her first call was not to the USA, not to President Biden, but to President Zelensky. She has accepted his offer of going to visit the country as well. All very well and good and noble, and a lot of people will say the right thing, but a lot of people will also say, really you're prolonging our hurt as well. You're antagonising the Russians, and they ain't going to play ball with us in terms of energy while you keep supporting Ukraine.
I mean, this is one of the biggest, most difficult questions in politics at the moment, but I mean, Liz Truss's view is that there's no security at home without security abroad. And that ultimately, you know, if you don't stand up to bullies, if you don't defend your democratic values, then everyone loses.
A real in tray she's got this morning for Prime Minister's questions is going to be challenging. One of the other criticisms of her is her delivery. Her presentation style is quite awkward at times. And, you know, Eamonn knows very well from interviewing her on this programme what she can be like. Prime Minister's questions, head-to-head against Keir Starmer. How do you think she's going to fare?
It's not as though Keir Starmer's a kind of massive charisma factory. And I feel like she's underestimated in terms of her delivery. Yes, it comes across as awkward, but look how successful she was during this leadership campaign. Look how she kind of grew in the debates and learned. And ultimately, I think people will care more about what she can do than how she presents herself.
Yeah, and also I think there's a difference between how you deliver something in terms of a speech and how you debate. And it'd be interesting, today we'll be looking at the debating factor, which may be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know that Keir Starmer's very good at the kind of forensic questioning. He's on top of the detail. But so is Liz Truss. I mean, you know, one of Boris Johnson's weaknesses against Keir Starmer was, you know, bluster and not being on top of the brief. And Liz Truss is exactly the opposite of that, in a way. OK, Alice, always lovely to talk to you. Alice Denby, Deputy Editor of CapEx. Thank you very much indeed. 6:15 is the time. Here's what's happening news-wise. Let's bring you up to date.
Well, the new Prime Minister, as we've been hearing, Liz Truss and Joe Biden shared their first phone call last night. In a statement, the White House said the President stressed the importance of reaching an agreement with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol.
The TUC has warned the new Prime Minister that if she moves to weaken workers' rights, they will take her to court. They said she will face huge resistance if she tries to alter health and safety legislation or make it more difficult to strike.
Prince Charles is going to meet the parents of a teenager who died from an allergic reaction to a Pret sandwich. He's hosting a global conference on allergies. Well, the two-day event was organised by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation. It was set up by the parents of 15-year-old Natasha, who died following a severe allergic reaction to sesame in a sandwich during a flight to France in 2016.
Well, you heard in those headlines there, President Biden and his worries about the Northern Ireland Protocol. So Liz Truss begins her first full day as PM, and she may be looking back at her predecessors for inspiration.
And with many of the issues faced by her new government, from inflation to strikes, being those the same as those faced in the 1980s, she could be looking to Margaret Thatcher for solutions, as our Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie reports.
The saying, there is nothing new in this world, is oh so true. Strikes, energy costs and inflation on everyday goods such as food. Liz Truss has a massive hill to climb, and people like Colin Blythe, who's a manufacturer, is finding it hard to get staff and sees very little reward for the pressure of business.
There's not a lot of hands-on guys anymore. Nobody wants to be hands-on. There just seems to be this thing. It's taught into them. You can make your money, you know, without actually working for it. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of worry, a lot of things that people only see a big place to see whatever. They don't see the stress, the strain, the hours, after hours work you have to put in to run a business.
Michael Deans is a top restaurateur and is watching his outgoings double.
Our last electric bill was £15,000 for this site, which is 3 restaurants, as you know. It was 6,000 this time 6 months ago. So it's more than doubled, and then we haven't even looked at the gas yet. Labour cost is up, everything is up.
So while those that create employment are finding it tough, the employed are facing the same, and Erin Massey and Jordan Bryce of the CWU are on strike.
We need to have a fair pay raise. We need to be brought up to the standard of living. We're facing the same crisis that everybody else is facing. We've got bills to pay, mortgages to pay, rents to pay, children to rear, and we're finding it hard. Our members are struggling.
If I stayed at home and was a carer, I could earn more money. That's the reality.
There is no doubt that any period in time can be compared. Right now, it could be argued we're living between 78 and 84. Back then, Margaret Thatcher took on the unions and exported our manufacturing. Except for here. This concrete road was the road for her venture with a flamboyant American by the name of John DeLorean. Thatcher's bold step to fund a multi-million-pound factory in a financial storm was seen as daring, converting a greenfield site in just 2 years. DeLorean, of course, failed commercially. Recessions in the United States and on a worldwide scale ended up killing the company. The vehicle itself, though, did find its iconic future as a time-travelling capsule. Imagine if we had one right now, where we could go to the future. David Mathers is a DeLorean owner whose vehicle is complete with its own movie flux capacitor. David, tell us what happens when this DeLorean gets up to 88.8 miles per hour.
3 penalty points and a £60 fine.
Liz Truss has so much to get done in so little time and must build more than a Hollywood dream. Doogie BD, GB News.
Doogie the man. You won't believe this, but I'm actually going to see that very car on Saturday. Yeah, at a car show, which I've been invited to by the gentleman who owns it before. Beautiful. I've always wanted to own a DeLorean. And every time I go to buy one, people talk me out of it. And then I realise now that my back's gone, I can't climb in and out of it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's an awkward entrance and exit.
Very good point. But lovely gull door wings, it has to be said, on it. So what were you were going to tell me here about business?
Well, we're looking, aren't we, at the impact that Liz Truss will have on the economy. Was there kind of a bit of a boost, a surge yesterday on her announcement? Front page of the Times, and Liz Truss is telling everyone we can ride out the storm. Well, financially, shares in British business rose sharply yesterday. Inflation fears were downgraded after Liz Truss was confirmed as Prime Minister. And we are expecting, probably tomorrow, there'll be an announcement on energy, not just for individual households, but for businesses as well, who are absolutely desperate for it. And later on in the programme, we're going to be speaking to one landlord about particularly how difficult they're finding it. But is she a boost for business?
Well, obviously she is on the markets, but, people, are you being deluded? Deluded actually think that you're going to have money to spend. I mean, all I see is doom and gloom. And this week, where Russia turned off the taps again, energy prices, wholesale energy prices went up by 30%. In Northern Ireland, people are paying 52% more than they did last year on their electricity and their gas. This is serious stuff. I don't think people actually realise how poor they're going to be. And the fact is, they don't have the extra cash to go on that holiday, to have that party, to
go out for dinner.
To go out, well, yes, to go out for dinner as often as maybe they did before. And, Christmas is going to be... Who on earth, tell me this, last year you see everybody, they put out the lights, they put lights on for Christmas, so it's all very
beautiful.
Lovely and beautiful and gorgeous. Who's going to do that this year? Who's going to spend the money having Christmas lights all over their house? Not, you won't see them, you're in the house, so it's for your neighbours, they're for showing off or for charity or for whatever. But I can't imagine that being on the same scale as it would normally be.
Well, particularly when we're getting advice about, specifically how much things like putting on the kettle costs, doing a wash, using the tumble dryer. It might then seem a little bit of an indulgence to say, well, we'll go full out on all the Christmas decorations if you're considering, the tumble dryer might be out for the next few months.
No, I agree with you. And, just things I was thinking about today. I was just setting aside a couple of pieces of clothing for the dry cleaners. But how can dry cleaners afford to operate? How can laundries afford to operate? Your tumble dryers and washing machines. You go to the high street and people who use laundrettes and whatever. How can these people stay in business? I mean, it's not... I mean, a lot of this, and also, I still can't work out why we, in our energy caps, are paying these energy companies. We're saying basically, look, don't you worry, you charge what you want, we'll pay you the difference, we'll just cap it at 2,000 quid or whatever, but we'll pay it. The government will pay it, meaning you'll pay it, I'll pay it, everybody's going to pay it, you're going to pay it. Why don't you just take a windfall tax from them? I really just don't get that. I don't get it at all. Excessive profits, and yet we fund that as well. We shouldn't. The country is broke. It is absolutely broke. And she's going to promise tomorrow, oh, don't worry, we're going to pay for all of this for how long? 6 months, a year and a half? And that's only that. What about, small businesses in particular? Pubs and clubs and, as I say, laundrettes and chip shops and goodness knows what. How on earth will these people survive? And when they go, what do we do about it? So all this delusion that we can carry on as normal, we can't carry on as normal. What I'd like to know from you guys today, what are you doing that makes the difference? And you may be okay, you might be able to ride these bills, for a few months or whatever it is. But what about 2 years now into your pension, into your fixed income, eating your savings? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet at gbnews. Or am I a prophet of doom?
I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Do you not feel poorer? Do you not worry?
I really am worried, but I'm not worried for us particularly. I'm worried for, often I go out and report and speak to people and, for example, if you are someone who's already in debt, or if you're someone who is, we've decided as a society that you should be on benefits, the amount people are getting in benefits is nowhere near enough to pay their essential bills. No. And, I'll speak to people and they'll say, oh, I got my hair... If I get a little bit of extra income, I might be able to get my hair cut or treat myself to ice cream in my supermarket shop. People like that, it's not a case of kind of, well, or how often should I put my heating on? It's I can't afford to put the radiators on full stop. And right now, while it's still quite warm, some of those real issues haven't come to bite. But, come October and then the winter, it's going to be absolutely dire. So, no, I am worried. Maybe I just don't want to start my day feeling so...
I know what goes. I know what people cut straight away. Subscriptions to gyms, to television stations,
Delivery services.
Yeah, there's so many things that people say they'll probably drive less, fill up the car less often. What are you doing? Let us know, OK? Coming up, we're going to find out how Liz Truss will handle the special relationship with America after she made a phone call to Joe Biden. Not her first phone call last night, her second phone call. All that to come. Hope you'll stay with us. Here's your weather picture.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's more showers today. Yes, there'll be some sunny spells between the heavy downpours, but again, where we see the heavy showers, they could well turn into thunderstorms. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads this morning. Here's the reason why: a slow-moving area of low pressure just churning away just to the southwest of Ireland and throwing bands of heavy showers our way. It is a bright, sunny start for some, but if you've got blue skies, just keep an eye out the window, because quite quickly this morning the cloud will start to bubble up and the showers won't be too far away. We'll have that mixture of sunshine and showers for pretty much all parts through the rest of the day. Staying fairly cloudy and wet across Shetland, but some brighter spells elsewhere. But where we see those showers, heavy downpours, thunderstorms possible, could cause a bit of disruption and potential for local flooding in a few spots. It's still quite mild, though, out there this morning, and by this afternoon, temperatures getting into the low 20s in the sunny spells. But more heavy showers to come this evening. You can see them still spiralling around. It's quite gusty winds through today and tonight across South Wales, Southwest England, and across northern Scotland. Again, it'll be a pretty mild night tonight, even with clear skies. Temperatures likely to stay in the teens, certainly in most urban areas. And again, on Thursday, it's a case of watching the downpours develop after what could be a largely fine start, certainly for southwest Scotland, northwest England. But more showers likely, I think, tomorrow across parts of Wales, the Midlands and southern England. Some more for East Anglia too, and perhaps some more persistent rain at times, just affecting the east coast of Scotland, where there'll be a brisk breeze coming in from the North Sea, keeping the temperatures pegged back on the beaches here. But elsewhere again, we'll see a bit of sunshine between the showers and highs of 19 to 21 Celsius. The low pressure responsible is still with us on Friday. More heavy showers then, but it is also moving away. So it looks a lot drier for most of us by Saturday. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
£6:30 is the time. Thank you very much indeed for your company on this Wednesday morning. GB News at breakfast. Rosie Wright and Eamonn Holmes here.
Right, still to come on the programme, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has called the cost of living crisis a humanitarian emergency. She's put in place the idea of rent freezes. Is it a good idea? That's in 20 minutes.
I think it's a very good idea. The question is who pays for it. That's the thing there. Let us know your views, as always. 7:45 this morning. We're going to be speaking to Vince Cable. You may remember him, former Liberal Democrat leader. We're going to get, obviously, his political thoughts on the new regime at Downing Street, but also he's brought out a book, and his book is called, quite simple in case you're thinking about it, How to Be a Politician. Sir Vince will have the answer for you.
Well, you can join in any of our discussions, particularly Eamonn was asking earlier, what are you doing to try and mitigate the impact of the rising cost of living?
What are you cutting back on? Yeah.
And what do you make of Liz Truss, our new Prime Minister? You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us too @gbnews.
So the new Prime Minister spoke with President Joe Biden last night for the first time, both reconfirming their support for the special relationship between the UK and the USA, which, let's face it, nobody believes actually exists. But anyway, we, the media, keep peddling the idea that it does. Did it exist with Trump? Did it exist with Obama? Does it exist with Biden? Don't think so. But earlier this week, the New York Times described Liz Truss as
hawkish. They said she was a hawkish diplomat facing hard times.
Now, that mightn't necessarily be a bad thing, though, when you think about it, to be described as you're either a hawk or a dove, or whatever. Well, she will travel to Washington later this month to meet the president in person. His big concern is what?
Particularly because if we look at his background, the UK's handling of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
He's of Irish descent. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Colleen Graffy. With a name like that, she's of Irish descent as well, I would say. A former advisor to President George W. Bush. Very nice to see you again, Professor. Are you okay? Everything okay?
Everything's great. Good evening, good morning.
Thank you. So, New York Times, they're saying Liz Truss is a hawk. Is that better than being a dove in these times? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I need to take issue with your mocking the special relationship. So I think we need to delve into that. You suggest that it never really existed and it doesn't exist. And I can say, having served in the State Department.
Professor, are you really saying it existed under Barack Obama? Are you really saying that Donald Trump, I mean, he was in love with the Queen, yeah, but that's about it?
Well, what you're suggesting is that it's only about the head of state. It's the entire U.S. government and U.S. and UK government. And the special relationship, we usually say in the same breath, it's because we have shared values. And before you do an eye roll, may I just say that it is incredibly important in this day and age that we have shared values. I mean, at one time you could sort of think it's a bit of hokey, but now we have an existential threat with Russia invading another country. And these shared values for rule of law and democracy, we take them for granted. We think that they're going to be there forever. And they're not. We need to be working at it. And unless we have like-minded nations that care about these things, then the entire international legal world order could go asunder.
Colin,
so the fact that the US and the UK share these values of democracy and the rule of law, it's
corrected.
Critical.
I'm simply saying to you, yes, there is a special relationship when it suits the USA, and it doesn't suit them on trade deals, for instance. It suits them when it comes to security, but it doesn't suit them on trade deals. Tell me the trade deals that's working so well, that's getting Britain out of bother.
Well, as you know, some of the sticking points on the trade deal is our discussions on hormones and beef and rather technical things. And I think that there is a desire to have a trade agreement. And I think it's also impressive that Truss was pushing for UK accession to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, not just for trade reasons, but also for geopolitical strategic reasons, because she recognizes the growing threat of China. And there's another area where the United States and the UK are going to be working together. She supports NATO. And again, we can't take NATO for granted. She's looking at a 3% increase or 3% of the GDP for NATO. In other words, strong on defense. She's also understands the concerns about the rise of China. So I think
she's also going to have to deal with the Northern Ireland Protocol. And that, of course, has been a real bugbear for the president. Yeah. Why does he care so much about it? And can you see the two working together?
You put your finger on one of the tension points, which is the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I think that there's a desire to work through this together. But why does it matter? Because we've had all of those years of the troubles and the concerns with the United States of what's been happening in Ireland, Northern Ireland. And so this Good Friday Agreement is something that has brought peace. And the last thing we want is for that to go asunder. So it's I think that there's going to be efforts on both sides to make sure that we come to a good place on this. But of course, Biden, with Irish roots, cares immensely that there's peace in Northern Ireland. And I'm sure, well, obviously the UK does as well.
Yeah, there is, though, a big section of the UK electorate who voted for Brexit, who will look at that and say, Northern Ireland, as there will be the unionist parties in Northern Ireland, they would say we are part of the United Kingdom. We should be able not to be governed by the European Union after Brexit. And that's what's going on. They like the idea that they can biff the protocol and be UK European free.
Well, it is a complicated matter with lots of layers of problems and tensions, and that's a matter for the UK to work on. But the understanding in their phone call from yesterday was that it is a priority issue, that this peace remains, and we hope in good faith that that will happen.
Okay, Professor, we got to leave it there. Time is against us this morning. Always nice to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. At least we have a special relationship, Professor. Whatever goes on at top level, we'll keep that.
But I think I turned you around on the special relationship. It is there between our countries.
God bless. Thank you very much indeed. That's Professor Colleen Graffy there live from the USA.
and the new Prime Minister will be meeting with President Biden later on this month. So lots to come on what that special relationship might actually look like.
We have a special relationship with David Miller and Emma Burnell. They'll be going through the newspapers, so you don't have to after this.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
That was a very lovely special effect, wasn't it, that we were doing things? Was that deliberate or was that an accident?
I don't know. You got a bit of a glimpse of what happens when the music's playing.
We were like ghosts there, so we were. Ghosting in to do the papers this morning, David Miller, always a pleasure to see him, and political consultant and journalist Emma Burnell. Lovely to see you, as always, Emma. And David, everybody is Liz Truss mad today. Actually, I like the front page of The Sun today, which was the Queen and Liz Truss, and basically it says, hello, Liz. So it's Liz saying, hello, Liz, Liz to Liz, sort of thing. That's another story. I must tell you the story once how David Bowie's wife, who's called...
Eamonn.
And I came up to her and I said, Eamonn. and she said, Eamonn. And I said, no, it's like a moon. A moon. And she went, Eamonn. And I went, no, it's like a prayer. Amen, amen. And she I can't tell you what she tried to sue me for saying this before, but she wasn't pleased. She said, my name is Eamonn, why can't you say it? I said, I'm not talking about you, I'm trying to tell you what my name is. So that could be completely different.
She was probably totally uninterested in your name.
I'm sure there wasn't such a conversation between the Queen and the new Prime Minister yesterday. It is day one, David, and a new cabinet that doesn't feature anyone called Rishi Sunak or anyone who supported him.
Look, it's a bad 24 hours for me. Chelsea get a serious stuffing, and I have to come in. And you see, I'm a happy boy, and I try and be happy. But when I'm confronted with a day like Liz Truss had yesterday, I find it impossible to bite back the vicious words. I mean, what does she think she's playing at? The Conservative Party is hopelessly split. And as the good book saith, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And yet, what does she do? Allegedly, by the way, she offered Sunak the Northern Ireland secretaryship.
Get out of it.
Apparently. But let's be quite clear about this. She only won pretty narrowly, actually. And Sunak won with members of Parliament. So they've all now gone. She's got her own little gang. And
but could it have been a compliment
what's she
offering
doing to
Sunak?
bind up the wounds?
I'm suddenly thinking, you know, most of them run a mile when you mention Northern Ireland, and it usually goes to someone you've never heard of before. But maybe she's looking at the whole protocol thing and saying, Rishi, I got a real problem here, and you're probably the only man that can solve this, because I don't see how they are going to
I'd love
solve
it if she did that. But all she said was, well, I guess if you've got to be in the cabinet, you can take Northern Ireland.
So she was insulting him?
I think so.
Right. And he couldn't possibly have accepted?
Well, you know, I don't know what he's going to do. I hope he'll stick around because, you know, it bears thinking about. Although everyone was saying he was going to be humiliated, he wasn't. But I just think, look, the Liz Truss problem, what is that? The great Roger and Hammerstein music, I was going to talk about a problem called Liz. The voice is awful. The charisma is absent. You know, I've told you the old joke, it'll get one more outing. She thinks charisma's December the 25th, you know? And essentially, what she has to do is to try to create a Conservative Party that is a competitive force.
OK, but could I say that maybe there are those who would say, and I'd be interested in your view on this, that she's got to come in there and she's not all bells and whistles like Boris Johnson and she doesn't promise the world or whatever, but maybe she's just saying, look, it's pretty tough. I'm the person to do it one by one, bit by bit, in a very pragmatic, practical manner. Do you think you could make that case, or has Mr. Miller got a point?
I think David very much has a point. I think if she were going to do that, she certainly had that opportunity for that reset. I don't feel that a cabinet where you put Jacob Rees-Mogg in charge of the biggest crisis that we're facing at the moment, the energy crisis, and the longer-term crisis that we have in terms of climate change, is a cabinet that has moved on from the unseriousness of Boris Johnson. I think what she's unfortunately done is taken some of the worst elements of the Johnson government and is trying to deliver them without the benefits that Johnson had. It didn't work on me, but in general, people were appealed to by Boris Johnson's charisma. So I think she's doing that with no showmanship. So all you
the
can
showmanship
see is the
was
shoddy
Boris
working.
Johnson's downfall in the end, though, wasn't it?
No, Boris Johnson's downfall was his unseriousness. If he'd managed to front a more serious government with that showmanship, he would have been an unstoppable force, the unstoppable force that Labour came up against in 2019. Unfortunately, he just couldn't take himself seriously enough to deliver on his promises.
But I don't think she'll like the papers today, you see. But I must bear in mind we're reviewing the papers. The Mail, Sunak supporters lose jobs as PM appoints cabinet of loyalists. I mean, she was supposed to be a woman who was trying to be Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher offered all of the four people who stood against her for the Conservative leadership jobs in her cabinet. And although I can't...
Did that work out well? In the end, we talked about this yesterday. I mean, you know, you're inviting the enemy into the camp right from the start to bitch and snipe and whatever.
Well, I mean, the thing was that she put together a government that was generally very successful. Of course, the moment she slipped, there were one or two of them who were only too happy to give her an extra push. But, you know, a party is a party. You can't have a faction within a party running it. Times, bloodletting had begun before she saw the Queen. And then we've got all these enemies. I mean, Boris is not going to shut up.
And
Boris is interested in one person. And, you know, the Times says, Priti Patel is cast into exile but won't be going quietly. The Conservative Party does not need to, I return again to the good book, to be a house divided against itself. It's a hopeless situation.
And I think also, Eamonn, there's a difference between bitching and sniping, as you described it, and actually testing your ideas robustly. And if all you do is put people who are never going to challenge you into your cabinet, your ideas won't be properly tested in a more friendly atmosphere, and they go straight out into the public realm with no real robust testing. And trust me, we'll be testing them.
She's also gone for inexperience. And one of the other points that's worth bearing in mind is Margaret Thatcher was not out there on her own. She had great help from formidable people within her cabinet. I was a protégé of William Whitelaw, who was a marvellous man. Everyone needs a Willie, says Margaret Thatcher. And basically, he kept the party under control. and nobody wanted. He was an ex-chief whip, and he knew how to monster some of the troublemakers.
Is there an argument, David, that right now we've got a new Prime Minister at the helm, a serious energy crisis? What we need is positivity and people to get behind her rather than sort of unpick her and pull her down before she's even started?
Rosie, there's this there's this word positivity, which really irritates me because it's not real. It's a lie. It's a lie. And I don't know. I know people respond to this, but I'm the sort of person I look and say, but you're telling lies. That is not the truth. David, what are you like with this positivity, this false
I just think
positivity?
It's a stupid buzzword. I think where we get to with this, I was saying, about Margaret Thatcher, she surrounded herself with people who could do the job. Geoffrey Howe, he was the one who reshaped the economy. He got no thanks for it, including from her. But look, the point is, when you look at this cabinet, it's an attractive cabinet in the sense if they're photographed, it shows Britain to be a place
diverse,
and there's nothing wrong with that. But the worry is that how many of those people at the end of the day are load-bearing? What she needs are experienced people who can actually... I mean, this is a terrible situation. I mean, I've been in politics for 50 years. I was involved in politics for many years, either in Parliament or running for Parliament or writing about those stuff. This is the worst situation I think we've been in 50 years. And so has she got the team to deal with it?
Well, OK, has she got the team? Incidentally, the Northern Ireland Secretary is Chris Heaton-Smith. No offence to Mr. Heaton-Smith, I've never heard of him.
I think he's Heaton-Harris, is he?
Oh, Heaton-Harris, sorry.
It doesn't matter. Why would if you don't know, who else is going to know? Not even a household name in his own front room,
OK, well, Emma...
Wasn't he also a whip previously, which has not been a department that has shone in recent times?
Well, look, I mean, I'm happy to move off the subject of conservatism. I often think if you support another party, you're only hearing one message for the past 7 or 8 weeks, which may well have been the intention. But in The Guardian, Emma, you've chosen a story which says, if you have kids, you're more likely, or it may actually make you more conservative. Why is that?
So this is small c conservative rather than more Tory.
OK.
But there's a study been done. I slightly challenge the premise, although given that I am childless, maybe that's the reason why I've retained my left-wing values. But a study's been done where they took 2 groups of university students and showed one lot of them household objects and one lot of them children, and asked them to think about how they would interact with these 2 things. Then asked them questions about their values. And it seemed that those who had imagined and deeply interacting with children then came back with more socially conservative values. I think it's an interesting study. I think there is a general perception that we may get more conservative as we get older, although I think that the barrier to that has been shifting. So it's been getting higher. The age level of which people are more likely to vote Conservative has been getting higher at elections, each election. And that, I think, is more to do with economics. But I find it interesting, the idea that we teach kids our values, but then change our values through kids.
Very good, very good. Interesting point. And viewers and listeners, I'd like to ask you, as you became older, as you had more responsibility, as you had children, did it change your outlook on the personality and the person you were? Did you become more conservative with a small c? Guys, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. David and Emma will be back in 40 minutes' time.
Right, it is 9 minutes to 7. Let's turn our attention to Scotland because a major announcement yesterday. Nicola Sturgeon announced a rent freeze across the country until March next year in a bid to deal with rising costs of living. OK,
she announced the move and she called it a humanitarian emergency. Here's Dan McCroskey. Dan's political advisor and columnist for the Scottish Express. Good to see you, Dan. Dan, first of all, I mean, it's not that I look at something like a rent freeze and you think, gosh, that must benefit so many people. But when it comes to Scotland all the time, I think people everywhere else and people in Scotland probably say, very well and good, fantastic. Well, I think it's fantastic, I don't know. But how do you pay for it? Where's the money come from?
Yeah, I mean, on the face of it, this seems like a great idea, doesn't it? As you said, I mean, there's about 38% of Scots that are in the rental market, so this tackles or helps a big group of people, and it probably doesn't cost government that much money to impose a rent freeze. After all, it's not them that pay rent or charge it. But this creates two big problems. The first big problem is that it creates more of a burden for landlords, who I know aren't in vogue at the moment, or never always in vogue. But they've got additional costs to pay, particularly maintenance and the rising cost of maintenance to maintaining properties. That will inevitably going up because of other cost increases across society. So they have additional costs to pay, but won't have that flexibility to help pay those costs. And then that leads to another problem. Do landlords take properties off the market because they see it as no longer viable to keep properties on the market, particularly empty properties, I should note. And the Scottish Association of Landlords were quite robust yesterday in their views on this, and they effectively said that the blame for reduced housing stock in the Scottish market will be very much at the door of Bute House and the SNP government. So this is potentially be quite serious. Short term, it sounds good. Long term, this could have very serious implications, and you only have to look at other countries around the world that have similar rent controls to see that this does take properties off the market and really restricts the opportunities for people who want to go into the rental market.
Working, of course, closely with the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and over the campaign, both had some rather sharp words in describing the other. What do you think their relationship's going to be like?
So I think the leadership campaign obviously has to be parked to one side now. Obviously, the comments, in my view, were ill-advised. I think a lot of other Scottish Conservatives believe the same. I think there's time for a reset, because after all, the Prime Minister is no longer talking to the selectorate of Conservative members who, let's be frank, don't like Nicola Sturgeon, north and south of the border. She's now talking to the rest of the country, and in particular, Middle Scotland, the kind of people who aren't unionists or nationalists, who don't vote Tory at every election, might switch the parties that they vote, but probably at the moment most probably vote SNP. But they will vote for other parties, and they need to hear from leaders who work together. And I think see that open-mindedness. So I think to vote. So I think for Liz Truss to appeal to that demographic in Scotland, perhaps the kind of people who voted Conservative in, say, 2017, when Theresa May was Prime Minister and Ruth Davidson was leader of the Scottish Conservatives, to win those people back, who after all didn't vote for us in 2019, to win those people back. I think they want to see a Prime Minister who is willing to work with Scotland. They saw that with Theresa May, who in her first week came up to Scotland to visit Nicola Sturgeon. They won't agree on things like the Constitution, but on the bigger issues, I think if they're seen to be working together, and I think if the UK government is seen to be proactively working with the Scottish government rather than against it, I think actually that appeals more to those middle voters, the people that the Scottish Conservatives need to win over, but incidentally the people that the Conservatives need to win over as well.
Well, very interesting, Dan. Appreciate your perspective and your time this morning. Dan is the he's a Scottish political advisor. He's also a columnist for the Scottish Express newspaper. Thank you very much indeed. Talking about Christmas lights, and we're saying, can you actually afford them, or should you have them, bearing in mind the cost of energy? Tony says, how about using solar lights outside? We have them in the garden. They use energy stored from the sun. I'm not sure I've seen any Christmas lights in a solar capacity, but it's an interesting point. And who else?
But I mean, we're talking about the cutbacks that people will be making because of the rising cost of living. And
Yeah.
Billy, good morning's got in touch saying, I'm a member of a leisure centre. I swim 5 times a week. I'm saving money by being a member as I shower and shave there. I don't use my hot water at home anymore. It doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah. Well, Billy, you're doing that and enjoying that, and it's good advice for a lot of people until the local authority decides they can't afford to heat the pool or keep the leisure centre open. So that's what could be on the horizon. Let us know your views. 3 minutes to 7. Here's the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's more showers today. Yes, there'll be some sunny spells between the heavy downpours, but again, where we see the heavy showers, they could well turn into thunderstorms. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads this morning. Here's the reason why: a slow-moving area of low pressure just churning away just to the southwest of Ireland and throwing bands of heavy showers our way. It is a bright, sunny start for some, but if you've got blue skies, just keep an eye out the window, because quite quickly this morning the cloud will start to bubble up and the showers won't be too far away. We'll have that mixture of sunshine and showers for pretty much all parts through the rest of the day. Staying fairly cloudy and wet across Shetland, but some brighter spells elsewhere. But where we see those showers, heavy downpours, thunderstorms possible, could cause a bit of disruption and potential for local flooding in a few spots. It's still quite mild, though, out there this morning, and by this afternoon, temperatures getting into the low 20s in the sunny spells. But more heavy showers to come this evening. You can see them still spiralling around. Quite gusty winds through today and tonight across South Wales, Southwest England, and across northern Scotland. Again, it'll be a pretty mild night tonight, even with clear skies. Temperatures likely to stay in the teens, certainly in most urban areas. And again, on Thursday, it's a case of watching the downpours develop after what could be a largely fine start, certainly for southwest Scotland, northwest England. But more showers likely, I think, tomorrow across parts of Wales, the Midlands and southern England. Some more for East Anglia too, and perhaps some more persistent rain at times just affecting the east coast of Scotland, where there'll be a brisk breeze coming in from the North Sea, keeping the temperatures pegged back on the beaches here. But elsewhere again, we'll see a bit of sunshine between the showers and highs of 19 to 21 Celsius. The low pressure responsible is still with us on Friday. More heavy showers then, but it is also moving away. So it looks a lot drier for most of us by Saturday. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Liz Truss assembles her cabinet as she prepares for her first Prime Minister's questions at midday today.
Hello there, very good to see you. It's just after 7 o'clock. It's a Wednesday morning, 7th of September. Breakfast in GB News, Eamonn Holmes and Rosie Wright, because Isabel is bringing her youngest to school today, first day at school. So here's what's leading the news this morning.
The newly appointed Prime Minister Liz Truss will chair the first meeting of her new cabinet this morning. Amongst those in attendance will be her new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly.
Now, this comes as she prepares to go head-to-head with Sir Keir Starmer for the first time during Prime Minister's Questions, which is just after midday today.
Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News. But what's the impact been on business? Well, shares in British hospitality and retail rose yesterday in the wake of Truss's appointment ahead of an announcement on an energy support package we're anticipating will happen tomorrow.
In Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has announced a rent freeze for both social and private tenants until March next year. In her speech announcing the policy, she said the cost of living crisis was a humanitarian emergency.
Well, let us know what you make of the new Prime Minister and her cabinet. You can join any of our discussions. You know the email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us too @gbnews.
So the Prime Minister will chair her first cabinet meeting later this morning. It follows her speech yesterday at Downing Street. Several key appointments were revealed, including...
We've got Suella Braverman as Home Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor, James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary. You'll notice, actually, of that new cabinet, Rishi Sunak is not there, nor is a single Rishi Sunak supporter, and Boris Johnson's key fans also have not found a role.
OK. Here's how it unfolded yesterday. Our correspondent, Catherine Foster, looks back.
After a 7-week leadership contest, the moment had come for Boris Johnson to resign as Prime Minister. But not before one final performance outside Number 10.
This is it, folks. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now.
He also hinted at a possible return to high office, comparing himself to Cincinnatus, the Roman statesman called out of retirement to lead the people again.
Like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough, and I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support.
Boris Johnson said he would back Liz Truss and urged the Conservative Party to unite, comparing them to the age-old fight between cats and dogs, using his dog Dylan and Downing Street cat Larry as examples.
And I know that Liz Truss and this compassionate Conservative government will do everything we can to get people through this crisis, and this country will endure it, and we will win. If Dylan and Larry can put behind them their occasional difficulties, then so can the Conservative Party.
After the speech, some of the Prime Minister's most loyal allies shared hugs and souvenir snaps. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie then boarded a plane from RAF Northolt in West London to Balmoral. And it was in Her Majesty's Green Drawing Room that Boris Johnson met Her Majesty and offered his formal resignation. Next, it was the turn of new leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister-elect Liz Truss to board a plane to Scotland. After landing, she was driven to Balmoral for her audience with the Queen and was asked to form a government. It's not the first time she's met Her Majesty, but a private audience will have been a unique experience for her. Liz Truss is the 15th Prime Minister to serve the Queen. Back to Downing Street, and next came the big speech of the day. Liz Truss addressing the nation as Prime Minister for the first time.
Let me pay tribute to my predecessor. Boris Johnson delivered Brexit, the COVID vaccine, and stood up to Russian aggression. History will see him as a hugely consequential Prime Minister.
Truss acknowledged the huge issues facing the UK and pledged to focus on the economy, energy, and the NHS.
We shouldn't be daunted by the challenges we face. As strong as the storm may be, I know that the British people are stronger. Our country was built by people who get things done. We have huge reserves of talent, of energy, and determination. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm.
Now the nation watches and waits to see how Prime Minister Truss will address the challenging weeks and months that lie ahead. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, let's find out more and go live to Downing Street, where our political correspondent Tom Harwood has the latest for us. Tom, Catherine's just given us a brilliant analysis of what happened yesterday. Today, though, we're going to have the first cabinet meeting and Prime Minister's questions. How do you think Liz Truss is going to fare?
We are indeed. It was a bit of a scramble for Liz Truss to try and appoint her full cabinet last night ahead of this meeting this morning, which really sets up her first full day as Prime Minister. And as you rightly say, there's a busy in-tray. It's not just that cabinet meeting this morning. It's not just, no doubt, further calls with world leaders after speaking with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and American President Joe Biden last night, but also, of course, her first head-to-head match, I suppose, with Sir Keir Starmer across the dispatch boxes of the House of Commons. Now, Liz Truss is a seasoned minister. She's been in the government since the Cameron days. She's been across 6 different departments, speaking from that dispatch box in the House of Commons, but she's never faced Sir Keir Starmer. It will be a fascinating contest because Sir Keir Starmer has built his entire brand on being Mr. Plain, Mr. Sensible, beating back what he describes as a more blustering Boris Johnson. Liz Truss has a very different style. She casts herself as a plain-speaking Yorkshire woman. So perhaps Sir Keir Starmer will not be able to provide such a contrast with Liz Truss. It'll be a fascinating watch.
Thanks very much indeed. More reaction now. Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, that's Henry Hill, joins us now. Tom saying plain speaking. I would have thought there's that hint of what Boris Johnson did, which was the positivity thing. I don't think she spelt it out just how bad it really is, but the positivity thing, which people like to hear. They like to think, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel, or we will get through this. I mean, matter of fact, one of the headlines today, this sort of rhetoric, together we can ride out the storm. Now, that's despite massive energy bills, massive cost of living crisis. What did you take away from what you heard?
So I think her speech, there were 2 significant things I think about her speech yesterday, apart from how short it was. The first of which was no mention of levelling up. You know, the goals that she outlined were perfectly good, controlling energy bills, getting the NHS.
But the people she's supposed to retain in the red wall areas.
Precisely, it's not a hard word to say if you're name-checking things, and especially in a morning when the Yorkshire Post ran a big front page about how they were watching and listening for that. I think the fact she can't bring herself to say it is quite interesting. But also, obviously, there's no detail. You know, the Tories have been trying to fix the NHS forever. She's not said how she's going to fix the NHS.
Is that fair? She's not even been 24 hours in the post yet.
No. That wasn't a criticism of the speech, but I think that what's going to be significant today at PMQs is that she can't do the same thing, because what Starmer will do is he will go at her on the detail on any one of these issues, and she needs to have something. She can't have a fully worked out proposal. But, for example, she said yesterday she's going to put spades in the ground to solve the energy crisis. Does that mean she's going to force through onshore wind? Are Tory MPs going to let her do that? Does that mean she's going to open fracking wells? Is anyone going to let her do that? Like these phrases, they have to mean something. She will have some kind of plan in place.
Build nuclear power stations.
But that takes years, which is good, but it takes years. It's not going to help them. So she obviously hasn't worked out every detail, and that's fine, but she will need a lot more detail than she offered us yesterday, and PMQs will be the first test of that, I think.
But listen, I think like you. I do. I sit and say, give me the detail. What do you mean by that? But so many people don't want the details. So many people just want to hear someone say, it's going to be okay. From that point of view, do you believe her?
No. Ultimately, I wish her the best. We all want a government to get us through these challenges. I think whether you're Labour or the Tory, they are the government in power at the minute, and we want them to get through it. But a lot of these problems have been a very long time coming. And maybe this will be what shakes people out of their complacency, but, we're about to hose a vast sum of money propping up energy companies, basically, when if we'd invested that money over the past 10 or 20 years in our energy infrastructure, we wouldn't be in this position. And I think we're going to have that time and time again.
Henry, could you explain to me, could you explain to our audience what exactly you mean by propping up energy companies? Because for the life of me, I do not understand why they are such sacred beasts, why the government seems to, subsidise them. and what we're getting out of it. Are we getting energy security out of it? Are we getting cheaper energy out of it? I don't think we're getting much out of it, and they're getting a lot of excessive profit.
Well, in this case, I mean, for most of the suppliers, in fairness, aren't getting excessive profit. It's the producers who are absolutely raking it in. In this case, what the government is doing is freezing our energy bills, which is good in the short term because otherwise they would become unpayable.
But we're paying for that.
Precisely, but we're going to end up paying that back. Now, in my case, I'm feeling slightly aggrieved because I have a bills-inclusive contract. So actually, I'm going to be paying for 10 or 20 years for money that was lent to my landlord. Which is extremely aggravating. But basically what Liz Truss has done is that she ruled out handouts to families, and there are some good reasons for that, in that it can be quite difficult to set those processes up. And so instead, she's frozen bills, and she's targeting the state intervention at the energy companies, which is a way of doing it, which means if you want to help everybody rather than just people on the state pension or benefits, it is a way of doing it. But it means that there is effectively a huge transfer of taxpayers' cash to these companies in order to freeze bills. Together we can ride out the storm, can we? If we take really bold action, I'm just not entirely... Basically, the problem is that the government needs to nail the energy crisis, but nailing the energy crisis just means that they win the ability to get a hearing on inflation, on public sector pay disputes and the attendant strikes, on Northern Ireland. You know, there's a huge number of challenges facing this government. The energy crisis just wins them the chance to solve the others. What is your view as a Conservative? What is your view on the fact that it is a loyalist cabinet and that there was no attempt to bring the Rishi Sunak camp on board? I think it's a slightly strange decision, given the state of the polling. There's almost certainly not going to be an early election. Because in normal circumstances, somebody like Liz Truss would want an early election in order to win their own mandate, and it would make sense to select a cabinet of loyalists who make you strong in the short term. Then you have an early election to win your own mandate. Given that the Tories are 15 points behind in the polls, we're not going to have an early election. And so, therefore, what she's done is, in the very short term, she has a cabinet that's going to be singing from her hymn sheet. But in the medium to long term, there are going to be a lot of people who are resentful about being passed over or resentful for being kicked out of office, on top of her ideological enemies. And the moment things start going wrong for her, she's going to have a lot of trouble on the backbenches.
Henry, thank you very much for your analysis. We often talk about Prime Ministers having this sort of early honeymoon period, don't we? Whether Liz Truss will have one, time will tell. Thank you very much, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. It is 7:15. Let's look a little bit further afield from politics to house prices, because last month house prices fell for the first time in a year. But in the past 10 minutes, figures from the Halifax Price Index have been revealed. The prices have actually risen this month by 0.4%, but the rate of annual growth has slowed once again.
Our reporter Ellie Costello. Ellie is in North London to talk us through this one. Good morning to you, Ellie. Tell us more.
Yes, good morning to you both. I'm Adam Hayes, estate agent in North London this morning. We are, of course, reacting to those house price index figures that have just been released in the last 10 minutes. Perhaps good news if you're working in this industry. After last month, the rate fell by 0.1% in July. In August, increased by 0.4%. So only a tiny amount, but perhaps good news that we've seen some growth. We know that annually the growth is down 0.3%, but a typical UK property now costs a record £294,000. And here in London, you can see some of the prices potentially behind me here. It will be no surprise to you, it's the most expensive area in the country. Now, in terms of growth, it's Wales where we're seeing the largest amount of growth. So perhaps if you're buying a property, Wales is the place to be. Well, I want to bring in now Yasser El-Kafas, who is the Managing Director here at Adam Hayes Estate Agent. Yasser, those figures out in just the last 10 minutes alone. What's your reaction to those?
I mean, it's good news. At the end of the day, you know, prices haven't gone down. It's one of those things where we don't tend to pay too much attention to figures this time of the year. There's always going to be that little bit of a lull where properties, you know, people do go away on holidays, the market does slightly calm down somewhat. So they can go up, they can go down. It doesn't make too much of a difference this time. The figures are really insignificant. It's such a small margin of both up or down. So I'm not, paying too much attention to the sort of figures.
Yep, so good news here this morning, but we can't deny the factors that are surrounding this as well. We are in a perfect storm at the moment with the cost of living crisis and interest rates rising as well. Many people struggling to get mortgages. Earlier I spoke to Joanne Roberts, who is struggling to get a mortgage. Let's hear what she had to say.
Got good credit history. If I can't actually be a home mover, who can? And I'm finding that quite hard to accept. I do think that with the cost of living crisis and things like that, it will put people off moving potentially, because we might just batten down the hatches and start paying the bills, because it's all cost having these surveys and doing these things, and then you can't get the mortgage to go through. It's quite soul destroying, really.
So Yasser, let's get your reaction there to what Joanne was saying.
We sympathise certainly with people like Joanne, and it's we see it as a predicament for people out there, and it's the cost of living is certainly going up. So I can understand what Joanne's actually going through, and we are certainly seeing things like this. But ultimately, my advice is try and compromise slightly with what you're looking for. If it means going slightly further out of the areas that you're ideally looking for, then do so. If it means doing a bit of work to a property, it might be worth doing that, because ultimately the market will always recover. Interest rates are still incredibly low right now, and jumping on the property market right now is definitely something that we always suggest and encourage.
So there you go, Yasser's saying it's a good time to buy a property. Well, how difficult is it to get a mortgage? Yesterday I spoke to Emma Jones, who's Managing Director of When the Bank Says No. This is what she had to say.
What we're seeing at present is that affordability has tightened with a lot of lenders over the last month or two. And then obviously, as you know, the rates have gone up. So we're seeing that the payments are increasing, which is higher than some of the clients' budgets that we've been meeting. We are anticipating to see a lot more business coming our way due to the difficulties in the marketplace. So hence why our brand is When the Bank Says No, because a lot of clients are now being rejected from the high street lenders, where traditionally 6 to 12 months ago,
So yes, it's quite hard for some people to get a mortgage, but you think still a good time to buy?
I mean, we've seen it time and time again. We saw it during the Brexit times, we saw it in the financial crisis, we saw it, during the pandemic. The market will always have a little lull, but jumping on that market where you can potentially get a good buy, definitely do so, because in a couple of years' time, prices will carry on going up, and people will always regret not buying 2-3 years before. These are probably one of the best times to be buying, because there are good buys out there and there's decent investment opportunities for people.
Fantastic, Yasser. Really good to have you with us this morning. Well, there you go, Rosie and Eamonn. According to Yasser here, now is still a good time to buy. House prices are up 0.4% here this morning. Huge sigh of relief, of course, to people in this industry.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like a good time to sell if you had it. That's the thing. You don't want to hear prices are up, you want to hear they're coming down.
If you're trying to buy one, for sure. Ellie, thank you very much.
An average UK property costs, and this is a record amount, average price for the country, nearly £300,000, £294,260. And if you're in Wales, highest growth in the country's coming from Wales. London, though, the stories I hear, with us living, or me here during the week in London, people can't rent, people can't find it. It's a landlord's market, it's a seller's market. London has the highest price inflation for 6 years, so it's a really bad news. But then, as I always say, what do you want to live in London for anyway? I'd love to live in Manchester, or I have done in the past, Manchester or Leeds, Glasgow is amazing. Belfast is the best of all. But,
of course you'd say that.
I know when I drive through the countryside, I was up in Leicester the other day, and I was driving through and I just thought, this is beautiful. It's beautiful, Leicestershire countryside, Loughborough, all around. It was just, there's so many lovely, lovely places, but unfortunately because of work, you then just got this big, megalith, monolith, whatever the name is, monster that is London. And is there really a quality of life? Is there really value for money? What's happening? Prices in Northern Ireland are going through the roof for property, right? Why? Because we educate people for a brain drain. We educate people in they're not jobs to keep them there. So they all go to England, right? And then now what's happened is they've decided they'd rather go back to Northern Ireland where they get much better value for money and either get a job because the economy's getting better, or they will do the commute as well.
Maybe they get a garden.
They'll get an estate for that. An estate in Northern Ireland means different, I suppose, than than somewhere else. I don't mean a council estate, but you could buy a castle. You could.
Okay.
Over 30,000 firefighters. This we're talking about, and this is really serious again. Just people can't afford to live. We're talking about, you know, people splashing out on properties and whatever. Firefighters are considering strike action because they've been made a pay offer of 2%.
Yeah, a vote's going to be held in 5 weeks' time. If it's successful, could millions of people be put at risk? The last time firefighters had a strike, it took over 5 months to resolve. That was all the way back in 2002. It wasn't solved then until the summer of the year after.
Joining us now, trade unionist and firefighter. You'll see him appearing on GB News as well. Paul Embry. Paul, good morning to you. Paul, how have we got to this stage? How do we get here again? I mean, I look at you guys and you're in a similar boat to the posties as well. Royal Mail, that's a 2% take it or leave it offer.
Yeah, and just listening to your discussion there, Eamonn, the reality is firefighters are now in the same boat as many other people. We had an offer of 2% in June, and frankly, it was an insult at a time when millions of workers, firefighters included, struggling to make ends meet, being affected by the cost of living crisis. We've got firefighters visiting food banks, believe it or not, people working in the emergency services, but visiting food banks. And we said to the National Fire Service employers, look, you need to improve that offer. It's not acceptable. It's an insult to firefighters, and unfortunately, they haven't. So we're in a position now where we feel we've got very little option but to hold a ballot and head towards strike action.
So, Paul, I've got to ask you, who pays the bill for our firefighters? Where does it come from, central government or local authorities?
It's a bit of both, really, Eamonn. Firefighters are employed by local authority fire and rescue services. Some of the funding for fire services is raised locally. Some of it is provided by central government. I mean, the interesting thing is, as you'd know, the pay settlement for much of the rest of the public sector has been much better. I say much better. It's been better than 2%. Police, for example, received 5% back in July. Other workers in the public sector received 5% as well. So firefighters are looking at the situation and saying, well, hold on a second, why do you value us so low in that respect by offering us only 2%? And I think also, there's a lot of anger because of what happened recently with the heat wave. And the fact that firefighters were on the front line, showing the bravery and professionalism that they always do, dealing with all of the wildfires that were taking place across the country. They also worked through the pandemic, don't forget, remained on the front line through the pandemic. And for employers, the National Fire Service employers, to come to us and say, look, we only think you're worth 2% this year, and for us to say, look, please reconsider, and for them to say, well, no, that's all you're getting. Does anyone really question the fact that firefighters now feel, well, if that's what you're going to offer us, we've really got no option but to withdraw our labour?
So I understand that could be for many firefighters an agonising decision on whether to strike or not. Paul, can you just explain to us the kind of consequence of strike action? If it goes ahead, what might it look like?
Yeah, you're right, Rosie. I mean, I've been on strike before as a firefighter. I've been on picket lines, and it absolutely is an agonising decision, as you described it. You don't join the fire service to take strike action. You join the fire service to protect people, to save lives. And it really is a last resort. I mean, firefighters never take strike action lightly. But what it would mean, effectively, is a very, very basic service in place. Local fire authorities are required by law to provide a basic firefighting capability, but it would be nothing like the firefighting capability that is there day to day. And, we say to the employers and to government, look, don't risk public safety in that respect. Give us a decent settlement. Give us a settlement that shows firefighters they are valued and a strike wouldn't take place. This can be headed off. There's time to do it, but it needs will on the part of the employers and government.
Paul, can you give us an indication? People always want to know, what are we talking about? What sort of money are we talking about here? Whether it is, we were talking about average house prices there, but, I know a lot of firefighters can't even afford to live in the area of wherever their station is. Particularly, again, we get to London again. But what is the entry point or an average? Is there any figures you can give us if you were thinking of joining the fire service? What would your entry point be?
Well, a trainee firefighter can expect to earn around £24,000 a year. A competent firefighter, once they go through the necessary assessments and attain what's called competency, can earn around £32,000 a year. But it's interesting you raise the point about London, Eamonn, because that's where I work in London. And so many of my colleagues simply cannot afford to live anywhere near the Great London area. We have people coming in to do their duty from the Midlands, from the Southwest, from places like Bristol, from the north of England, even in some cases, where they come down, they do their stint, and then they go back for a couple of days afterwards. And firefighters really don't want to do that. You feel like you've done a shift almost before your shift actually starts because of the astronomical property prices, because of the relatively low wages. It's a real struggle for people. So this needs to be addressed in the long term, but certainly in the short term, 2% is simply not enough. It's really an insult.
OK, Paul, we'll leave it there and keep us posted. We'll be monitoring what goes on. We hope it doesn't come to a strike, but the ballot will go ahead. It'll be interesting to see the strength of feeling, which you say is going to be very, very high on that one. Paul Embry's a firefighter, he's a trade unionist, he's a GB News regular. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So it comes to that whole thing, isn't it, that, particularly accountants and people who are, writing the checks for all this sort of thing, they know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. How do you value your posties, your NHS staff, your police officers, your firefighters, or not? Maybe you just, the reality is, sorry, can't afford it. But I think the whole country was panicking with the bushfires and things that were happening just only a matter of weeks ago.
Yeah, over the summer it became so at the forefront of all of our attention with the heat wave, and then warnings, things like, don't have barbecues, because we're seeing these things get out of control. The conditions are so dry, and firefighters absolutely stepped in and were heroic in many cases over the summer. It's coming up to 7:30.
It is, and dry is never a term I've heard being applied to Paul Coit. He's always ready to deliver. And a big night in Champions League football last night. It's going to be another big night tonight, and we'll be talking about that and a few more sports things right after this short break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Here comes the sports slot. Back pages look like this morning. Chelsea, featuring, first of all, Daily Mail, gone from bad to worse for them. The manager, Thomas Tuchel, was left fuming as the side were beaten for the third time in 17 days. Right, Daily Express, here we go again. This is a reference to the Man City star striker and what an impact this man has had. Erling Haaland, another 2 goals for him last night in the Champions League. And City are being tipped quite favourably to do something at last because of him in the Champions League. Paul Coit is here now to talk about that. That is, he has made the difference. People now are saying that, maybe City will break their duck in the Champions League.
Yeah, I think it's what's been missing. His record, from 20 games, I'm going to ask you this. 20 games that he's played in the Champions League, how many goals do you reckon Erling Haaland scored in the Champions League?
In the Champions League?
In 20 games that he's played.
Well, you would be doing incredibly... Most strikers get, a rate of... If you've got 1 goal every 2 games, if you had 10 goals, you'd be quite happy at that.
20 games, 25 goals.
Incredible.
He's amazing.
He is a
and
machine.
you get people that say, and he is like a machine. And he's 6'5". The guy is just the ultimate test tube striker that's been created.
I know what you mean.
And it's his movement around the box. And people go, he only scores in the box and he doesn't. They're all tap-ins. It's his movement off the ball and he's so fast. The guy is unbelievable.
4-0 win away from home against Seville. And Celtic, I was watching the Celtic game last night. They were, listen, it was Real Madrid, but it was Champions League at Parkhead, wasn't it?
Well, it was. It was great to have Real Madrid there and to be playing Champions League football again. 0-0 at half-time, you're thinking, well, maybe. I think there was a lot of us that hoped more than actually truly believe that they could beat Real Madrid. But
well, I think a lot of people forget the romance of all of this and the fact that Celtic were the first British team ever to win the then European Cup in 1967 against the Lisbon... who was it they played for?
Was it
in Lisbon.
It was in Lisbon. Who did they beat in 67?
I'm getting too old to remember.
I don't remember those days.
But anyway,
as well. Chelsea...
But then it all changed next year, Man United.
Of course,
wasn't it?
68 at Wembley, of course.
Wembley, to do that.
But Chelsea lost to Dinamo Zagreb, and it's just the look on David Miller's face as I walked in was if that was a picture. And I said,
being a Chelsea supporter,
first thing I said to him, "How are you?" And he said, "How do you think I am?" And he wasn't too happy about it. Zagreb. The thing is, they've won 5 out of the last 45 games in the Champions League. Chelsea are not looking good at the moment. It's 3 away on the bounce now that they've lost, and the defence isn't looking good. Thomas Tuchel, he's a terrific manager, but there's form there.
Something not right.
It's at the same point where his teams seem to turn.
Okay.
And it's happened at Dortmund and it's happened...
Well, look, let's preview tonight. Your own team, Spurs, are in action. You're at home as well.
Well, yeah. The funny thing is...
You'll be working tonight.
I will be working at Spurs tonight. But the weird thing is that yesterday morning, I was just talking, I was just out in the street, I was in West London, because I was going to come in here, and obviously there was things going on. And I'm saying, like Cincinnatus, Spurs will rise... then return, and then who do I start using the quotes? And then around 7:15, I see someone walk out of 10 Downing Street using the same thing about himself. But it's about Spurs, so anyway, I hate that when that happens. But Spurs looking good, playing Marseille tonight, so back in the Champions League tonight.
But a great buzz, for anybody as a football supporter. Liverpool are away, they're in Napoli. Rangers, they have an early kick-off, I think it's about 5:45 tonight, and they are in Holland with Ajax.
Yeah, they're playing Ajax, and Rangers, European football suits Rangers probably better than it suits Celtic. It's one of those difficult things to try and see that Celtic and beat Rangers 4-0 at the weekend. In the cut and thrust of the Scottish Premier League, in my opinion, it seems to suit Celtic, whereas Rangers under Giovanni van Bronckhorst, and we know how well they did last year. In Europe, I think it suits them, so I think they're going to do well. But Liverpool, the club website, see, the thing is they're playing away at Napoli, which is not the safest place generally it's for fans to go. The club website is saying don't wear colours when you're travelling, don't visit the city centre, you've got to remain vigilant, don't make your own way to the stadium. It really sounds like, and they're very worried, especially what happened at the end of the Champions League in the final in Paris. So be careful, and this is what a lot of Liverpool fans have got to be very vigilant when they go there. And I had a friend that visited Napoli with Leicester last year and said it was a nightmare. They had organised buses, but they took them around the city and then they arrived about 20 minutes after the kickoff.
Oh.
So, whether they use that as well, I don't know, but it's not really a great place to go and watch football.
No, and it should be just a lovely celebration, a lovely carnival.
Of course it should.
The Champions League or any European
place to be,
football that we play. Paul, appreciate the roundup. Thank you very much indeed. And good luck tonight for the game.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Thanks for the offer of a ticket. Or...
You know the offer is always there. Fancy coming?
Got to be in bed early.
You'll be wearing a Marseille shirt. This is what worries me.
Nonsense. No. After the break, we are going to go through the newspapers in the company of David Miller and Emma Burnell. Hope you can join us for that.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 20 to 8. Welcome back to breakfast. Let's bring you up to date with the stories making the headlines this morning. And the new Prime Minister Liz Truss and Joe Biden shared their first phone call last night. In a statement, the White House said the president stressed the importance of reaching an agreement with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol.
TUC has warned the new Prime Minister that if she moves to weaken workers' rights, they will take her to court. They've said she'll face huge resistance if she tries to alter health and safety legislation or make it more difficult to strike.
Prince Charles is going to meet the parents of a teenager who died from an allergic reaction to a Pret sandwich. He's hosting a global conference on allergies. Well, the event was organised by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, set up by the parents of 15-year-old Natasha Aiden Laborhouse, who died following a severe allergic reaction to sesame in a sandwich in 2016.
With the papers, David Miller, and also we've got Emma Burnell as well. Emma, when we finished last time, we were talking about, there was a story in The Guardian and it said, as you get older, you're more likely to become more conservative with a small c. And a couple of people are sharing their stories with you on that one. George says, when I was young and I had few responsibilities, I found it more natural to be socialist. But when I got older, had kids, I became more responsible, more conservative. Churchill was right when he said, the older you get, the more conservative you will become. And Mel said, having kids makes you more conservative unless you're a narcissist. The whole mindset changes from me to us to them.
I mean, I wouldn't say that being socially liberal is not a them mindset. It may be that your expansion of them goes beyond your immediate family. But I think part of what the battle between the socially conservative and the socially liberal is generally about is about who and how we treat other people, and the rights and the clash of rights between individuals, groups, families. So I think there are definitely ways in which we may well become more conservative and ways in which our kids challenge us. And I don't have children, but I've got a nephew and niece and they're brilliant and they do challenge me.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear.
And it's great to hear from you guys watching and listening at home and sharing your stories with us.
Yeah, so please do continue to get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let's talk about the new cabinet. And David, you know, we were talking earlier about which people who've been shuffled out might not go down that quietly.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I think it's a good thing if the Conservative Party could appear united. It's rather a good headline, actually, in the Daily Mail, in a piece by Paul Groves. Political editor said, if Dylan the dog and Larry the number 10 cat can get on, then so can the Tory Party. Well, there's no evidence of that, sadly. When it comes to... I mean, I would have thought she would have learnt her lesson. Yeah, she wasn't the choice of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, and she won, bearing in mind all the hype there was, she won far that she was going to sort of destroy her opponent. She only won by 14% against Rishi. And so what she needs to do is create a government of all the talents. She's supposed to be a huge admirer of Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher did that. The four people that also ran for the Tory leadership at the same time as she did all got jobs in the cabinet. And I think, you know, you say to me, who's not going to go quietly? Well, Boris is not going to go quietly. Let's be quite clear about this. Boris is already
he as good as said he wouldn't yesterday. He as good as said he wouldn't go quietly yesterday.
That's exactly right. And although, you know, and Boris, look, at the end of the day, Boris is interested in only one thing. Yes, you got it, Boris. And he will want, therefore, to command the airwaves in the way that Trump is really taking over the Republican Party. He doesn't have to be president in order to be a baleful influence. And Boris, I think, perhaps is going to model himself on that. And then we've got Priti Patel. Now, Priti Patel is cast into exile, says the Times, but won't be going quietly. Now, the day that Priti Patel... I spent 5 years in the salt mines of the Home Office, so I'm familiar with it. And the day that Priti Patel was elected, I said I thought this was a strange appointment and no good would come of it. Well, no good has come of it. But the reality is that she won't see it that way. You know, she won't see that she got anything wrong. And there's a whole build-up of people, and one or two people like, you know, Grant Shapps I've always had my doubts about. But I must say, in recent times, I thought he'd been doing a good job. First of all, doing quite a lot of PR for the government, and secondly, doing the transport brief. Now, he's just been dumped. Is he going to think, this is wonderful, you know, I can go and have a few more coffees in the morning? And I mean, I don't want to bang on, but I think this is the agenda for the future now. Liz Truss has got to prove that she is capable of being Prime Minister, and the sceptics about that will not be the ones sitting opposite her. A lot of the sceptics will be the ones sitting behind
her in the back benches.
And Emma, you go to the Times, page 6 there. Partygate hasn't gone away just because Boris has.
No, and I think actually Liz Truss has made a very interesting... One of her first decisions has been to intervene. In classic Boris style, he tried to appoint someone to the committee that's overseeing the investigation on him that is known to be someone who's a big filibuster, someone who really likes to intervene and interfere in good parliamentary process, in Christopher Chope, famously known for sort of trying to talk out bills and things like that. And Liz Truss has immediately overturned that appointment, which I think signals that whatever else she might be doing, right or wrong, she does seem to be following the more parliamentary procedure rather than trying to overrule and override Parliament.
But why does she do that? I mean, what's the argument? Why does she do that? I mean,
I don't know, because I'm very interested, because I thought that she was clinging quite closely to Boris and Boris's supporters.
She was very complimentary about him yesterday.
Indeed. So maybe she's sort of focusing both ways. I think there is a party management issue that she has. She has a parliamentary party who did not support her. So this may be that she's trying to say to Parliament, look, I trust you to get on with your own process.
You know, I just think with Chris Chope, you know, he's an experienced man. He was leader of Wandsworth Council. He's a good friend of mine, actually. And he, I don't mean I approve of what he thinks about a lot of things, but, you know, he's no mutt. And what you want are senior backbenchers who are able to bring a level of scepticism. But he can't filibuster a committee of that kind. So why has she got rid of him?
Well, I think he was seen as, you know, Johnson putting him in at the last minute was seen as him trying to lean too heavily on the committee. So I think what she's trying to do is show that she's not doing that.
Yeah. But yet, we see in the Telegraph, now this is quite convoluted, Boris Johnson might go for
I chose that one.
Right, OK, tell me about this.
Well, this just shows Boris's ability to be a nuisance, even if he's not actually doing anything except existing. I mean, he is a nuisance because he exists, and, you know, like rain. But basically, what has happened is it's thought that because London has become a Labour town, it's thought he will not hold on to his seat, although, you know, it would be...
Or is he Ruislip? Or...
Yeah, Ruislip. And indeed, I think, linked up with Northwood, so a very potent combination, Ruislip and Northwood. Anyway, I think so. But so the idea is he'll go and stand up north, and he'll be, you know, a red wall person. It strikes me as incredibly contrived, that story, but... it comes from a very reputable journalist, and it just shows, if you want to look at the future, look at that story, that kind of stuff we're going to get endlessly, and it's going to be a huge distraction to a Prime Minister who's got a big job to do, trying to make people think that she's up to it.
Talking about big jobs, Emma, I just want to finish with, because we've got Sir Vince Cable just to speak to now, but just shortly, briefly, in the Express, two students, and they have... developed a device which allows women to check their breasts for breast cancer at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it would be nice to talk about something positive, because I don't think David or I are particularly enamoured of the new cabinet. So I am really impressed by these two young women's innovation. They've won this prize to develop this piece of technology that could be life-changing. It could save lives.
Yes.
And it's wonderful to see young people just going out there and really just thinking hard about how to make a difference. And I think one of the joys of innovation is they've thought of one small, narrow area, and they've focused down on it and thought about what's needed. And I'm really excited, and I really hope that they develop. I mean, you know, these are two people who are still in university. They've got massive careers ahead of them. And if they're doing this now, imagine what's to come.
They're from Imperial College London and Royal College of Art as well. And they were crowned winners of this year's UK James Dyson Award for Innovation. They get 5,000 quid for further development in all of this. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Thank you both very much indeed. So, a new PM means a new cabinet and fresh faces.
They're moving their way up the rungs of government. Well, we're joined now with someone who's got decades of experience, who has a new book out tomorrow. You might be amused by the title, How to Be a Politician. Well, Sir Vince Cable, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Liz Truss certainly has climbed to the top of that ladder in a more unconventional way with the downfall of Boris Johnson. We've had quite a lot of negativity behind this table this morning to her position. Are you feeling positive about the new Prime Minister?
Well, I would want to be, but, you know, the situation... I think there are two fundamental points of contrast with when I came into the government at the beginning of the coalition. The first is that now, as then, we have a horrendous economic challenge. The contrast is that, you know, we had what you might call political legitimacy, a mandate. You know, we had two parties with 60% of the popular vote in a general election, whereas she has no mandate at the moment. She may go to the country early on. She seems to be hinting against it and to try to get a mandate. But at the moment, she doesn't have, and her position, unfortunately, in Parliament and outside is relatively weak, and she can't afford to make mistakes. So we had an opportunity to operate for 5 years, better or worse, but we were able to provide stable government and make mistakes because we had a political mandate. She has none, unfortunately, and has no room for making mistakes. And the positive thing is that I think her approach of, the big bazooka approach to the economy, being willing to borrow very heavily in the short run to get us over the spike in energy prices produced by Russia's contraction of gas supplies, is the right approach. And to take a risk on that is, I think, the right thing, and I hope it comes off.
And I hope your book comes off as well. Interested in it, so much interest in politics from our audience. And, how to be a politician, is it a handbook as to actually how to climb up the ladder, or is it a number of stories that you've laced together? What sort of book is it?
Well, it's attempting to be humorous. It draws on a large pool of quotations, but mixed in with it, I hope, a little nuggets of insight and understanding. So it's part serious, part funny. Somebody who wasn't, I think, trying to be flattering described it as a sort of A-level politics, but much more fun. I think that's probably the right level. But I start with the kind of cynical observation of Billy Connolly, who said, anybody who expresses a wish to be a politician should be barred from life from ever becoming one, and try to address that cynicism. And the unfortunate problem is that politicians start with a bad reputation. There is a big poll, which I quote, in about 20 countries with lots of different professions, medics, teachers, estate agents, bankers, television presenters. And unfortunately, in almost every country, regardless of their recent history, politicians come bottom of the table in terms of public trust. So we start from a difficult place, but I do argue that it's a job that's worth doing, and it has to be done. Somebody has to empty the bins, somebody has to keep the drains functioning, and somebody has to keep the political system working in a democracy. And it's a messy job, and you can be very unpopular, but it's important to do it. And I encourage young people to do it.
You can be hugely unpopular. When we look at sort of the ratings of prime ministers when they get into office, normally they have a sort of honeymoon period and then it just drops off a cliff. How long do you think Liz Truss's honeymoon period will last?
Well, I think she'll get an initial boost. I mean, the public don't know her at all and start off, it would appear from the YouGov surveys, to have a very negative impression from these leadership hustings. But, if she makes a few of the right moves and talks about approaching this as a country rather than simply through the lens of the Tory party, she will get a boost of support. And if the economic policies that are being pursued seem to be going in the right direction, we'll get a lift from that. I wrote a blog a couple of days ago in which I argue that there is a way through. It's very difficult. I found it difficult to believe she will succeed, but it's possible. And if so, she might be wise to go to the country early next year, because beyond that, the problems start to mount up. You've got massively underfunded public services, you'll have debt service, and the government actually will have to increase taxes, not decrease them. So that may be her escape route.
Sir Vince, there is so much we could be talking to you about. Everything's topical and everything, the whole thing about the book on how to be a politician. How to be the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. You had to do that in your term in government, in your term at Cabinet under the coalition government. The job under Liz Truss has gone to Jacob Rees-Mogg. What do you think?
Well, I worry about it. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg in many ways is a very charming man, but I think what's required at the moment is, well, first of all, getting a support package for business. It's not clear what form that is going to take. When I was there, the main challenge was to get capital into business because the banks had seized up and weren't lending. And the business community is going to have to get a support package. We had one under the pandemic, the furlough scheme, and something comparable is going to have to happen now. And whether he's got the temperament for large-scale government intervention, I largely doubt. His previous pronouncements don't indicate it. And of course, the other requirement is to combine a belief in low carbon with a belief in our national energy security. And his comments on climate change, I don't think are really compatible with that, or indeed with what Boris Johnson was trying to do. Boris had actually had a good record on decarbonisation, COP26 and all that. And that seems a bit of a sceptic.
That's the energy title within the brief. And just as briefly as you can, energy is the thing that is first and foremost, I would imagine, in Liz Truss's in tray to deal with. It's what everybody is worrying about. If you were still in that job, would you be advocating a windfall tax on the energy companies or not?
I wouldn't, actually. I think, there are real problems with the wind. We have one at the moment, and maybe the government can squeeze a bit more out of the oil companies, but actually it's a short-term fix. You're going to have the problem a year or two down the line when the oil price, the gas price slumps. Are we then going to compensate the companies for having a bad time? And it's also, the point's often forgotten that these gigantic profits of BP and Shell and the others are mostly on the worldwide operations. In Australia, Nigeria, China, or wherever. They're not earned in the UK. They're the only bit that's relevant to the UK is the North Sea. And windfall taxes in the North Sea are a bit precarious.
Thank you. Sir Vincent Cable there. His new book, How to Be a Politician. And over the years, you'll have watched him in action, demonstrating that to you. He's got lots of good stories put together in that. It is out from the 8th of September. And what date is it now? That's tomorrow. Yeah, so it's out from tomorrow. Sir Vince, good talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Right, coming up to 8 o'clock after the break, we'll have more on that new cabinet as they prepare to meet in the next half an hour.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Liz Truss assembles her cabinet as she prepares for her first Prime Minister's questions today.
Well, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of September. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright.
Thanks very much indeed for your company. We're with you until 9:30 this morning. Here's what's leading the news today.
The newly appointed Prime Minister Liz Truss will chair the first meeting of her new cabinet this morning in about half an hour. Amongst those in attendance will be her new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, the new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly.
And she's preparing to go head-to-head with Sir Keir Starmer for the first time during Prime Minister's questions at midday today. And as a result, shares in British hospitality and retail businesses rose yesterday in the wake of her appointment ahead of an announcement on an energy support package. We believe that's going to be tomorrow.
And also talking financially, house prices have increased by 0.4% month to month. Its new figures out this morning revealed that a typical UK property now costs a record £294,260.
And you've been getting in touch with us, letting us know your views on various things coming in today. You know how to get involved in the conversation. There's the email address. You can also tweet at GB News.
So the new Prime Minister will chair the first cabinet meeting of the new government later on this morning. Following her speech outside Downing Street yesterday, several key appointments were revealed, including...
Suella Braverman, she's Home Secretary.
Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor.
And James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary.
Well, here's a reminder of how Liz Truss's first day unfolded, but let's find out who else might be in the cabinet and what's in store today. Let's go live to Downing Street, where our political correspondent Tom Harwood is there. Bring us up to date, Tom. Very good morning.
Good morning. I can bring you very much up to date because in the last 10 seconds, the new Education Secretary, Kit Malthouse, has just walked through the door to number 10. The cabinet arrivals are happening at this very moment ahead of 8:30 this morning, Liz Truss's first cabinet minister. The first minister attending cabinet through the door this morning was Ed Argar, the new Paymaster General. His car rolled up about 5 minutes ago, but we should expect these cabinet arrivals to be coming through the morning and getting more frequent as the morning goes on, up to that 8:30 meeting start time, of course. It was a cabinet that was appointed pretty swiftly last night. No major upsets. Reportedly, it was something that had been all settled before the walking up Downing Street and waiting inside for the formal appointments. A cabinet largely of loyalists to Liz Truss, no one who explicitly backed Rishi Sunak in this new cabinet. However, Team Truss is at pains to point out there are 5 former leadership rivals of Liz Truss now in this new cabinet, including, for example, Tom Tugendhat, who is now a security minister attending cabinet, Kemi Badenoch, the new Trade Secretary, Nadeem Zwahi, the new Cabinet on Office Minister. Many of those people who stood to be leader of the Tory party now in Liz Truss's cabinet. But we will be keeping you abreast through the morning as these cabinet arrivals come about. We've had 2 so far, and we'll be sure to check in when more come about.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. We're going to get more on all of this. The deputy editor of The Spectator joins us in the studio, and that is Freddie Gray. It's going to be like a beauty pageant going up Downing Street, and they all pose for their photographs going inside today.
It'll be special, won't it?
Yeah.
I think. Well, I'm trying to be pretty optimistic about it because, in a spirit of contrarianism, everybody is so down on Liz Truss already, and expectations are so low. And other people have said, as Vince Cable just suggested, when expectations are so low, you can, in a way, only succeed. And I've been saying for a bit now that I think we're going to see Liz mania. I think it will be very brief and very intense, but very sort of, because in the way that British people like to form attachments to people they know are thought of as wooden and a bit crap and underrated, I think we'll see a bit of that with Liz Truss. I don't think it will last very long, but that's what I predict for next year.
What do you think is going to fuel the Liz mania?
I think the massive hatred that she inspires, a particularly unpleasant form of hatred that she inspires in people, I mean, if you look at some of the sort of comics over the weekend that were sort of mocking her in that very sort of nasty, sneery way, I think British people react back against that, and they'll sort of be fair-minded about it and say, you know, she's new in the job, she's got a lot of very difficult challenges ahead of her, give her a chance, give her a break.
Freddie, it's as if you've been reading our views that are coming in from our viewers and listeners as well, because I would agree, I think that's exactly what they are saying today, sorry.
Well, I think British people are fair-minded, God bless them, I hope they are anyway. And I think, you know, there is this sort of terribly negative attitude about everything at the moment, and we are in what's called a doom spiral. Whether Liz Truss is the right person to get us out of that doom spiral, I don't know. But I'm all for people who say, let's give her a chance.
Well, the people doing that certainly will be the Cabinet, who are due to meet in about 25 minutes' time. What do you make of the team she's assembled around her?
Well, I think loyalty is back, baby. I think the thing about Boris Johnson was that he was never that popular among the parliamentary party. He never had a gang or a clique. Liz does have a clique, the Greenwich gang, they're called, because most of them seem to live in Greenwich. And she's certainly rewarded their loyalty. It's very much her set that are in, the other guys are out.
Not a single Sunak supporter amongst them.
No, and I think, you know, there's talent there. You know, Kwasi Kwarteng is a clever man. James Cleverly is a very able man. I think the sort of determination to write it off as a bunch of no-hopers is premature.
OK, I'd like to bring in now, and listening to what you had to say, Freddie, Nick Timothy. Nick is a former Downing Street Chief of Staff, and he joins us now. Very good morning to you, Nick. Good to see you.
Hello, nice to see you.
You heard what Freddie was saying there about the Cabinet and the collection. I mean, it is a Sunak-free zone. Of course, what's your take as a former Chief of Staff?
Well, it's a very capable and able cabinet, and Freddie just mentioned a couple of the names. I think Therese Coffey is somebody who's going to be worth watching. She's done a very steady and good job in the position she's been in. Now she's the Deputy Prime Minister, and she's going to be running the National Health Service from the Department of Health. So that's a huge promotion. She's definitely one to watch, I think. Obviously, Liz wants her supporters around her. I think the thing she's going to need to look out for is in not appointing any of the senior Sunak supporters into the Cabinet. What she's doing is putting more of those people onto the back benches in relative terms. And it's already going to be difficult for her as a new Prime Minister with a kind of contradictory mandate, because she inherits Boris's election mandate, but she's also just earned her own mandate from the party. It's going to be difficult enough getting some of the changes she wants to make through Parliament as it is. And so if she's putting more rivals onto the back benches, she may be making life a little harder for herself.
Nick, could you give us an insight? I mean, you were Chief of Staff. Theresa May became Prime Minister, and you worked with her. How did she do it? I mean, remind us of her cabinet and what problems, if any, she faced.
Well, I suppose in a way she maybe made some of the opposite mistakes, which is that she tried to balance the cabinet a little bit, and that led to some differences and divisions, especially on the biggest question of the day, which was Brexit. But in particular, the mistake she made was that she hired Philip Hammond as her Chancellor, and she didn't have a great relationship with him, and they were bickering and disagreeing from day one. Liz hasn't done that at all. She's appointed somebody who she gets on very well personally with, Kwasi Kwarteng, but also somebody with whom she shares a clear view of the world. So I would expect that to be quite a strong working relationship.
Let's just get your perspective on that. The balance of the cabinet that Liz has appointed.
Chemistry.
Well, yeah, the chemistry, but also how dangerous might it be for her when she now needs to unite a Conservative Party that are quite divided, not to have let in a single Sunak supporter?
Yes, I suppose it's the danger of having a sort of tight circle of friends, if you like, in politics, is that you also have quite a wide array of enemies. And I think we already hear a lot of whispering bitterness against Truss. The sort of coldness with which she's dispatched some people will go down very badly. I think there are obviously always going to be people who don't get the jobs they want. Lord Frost turned down a job. The rumour is that he wasn't happy with what he was offered, wanted something a bit bigger and better.
And there's a rumour as well that Rishi Sunak was offered a job. If you want to be in the Cabinet, you can be the Northern Ireland Secretary.
Yes, I don't know whether that's true.
Yes.
But I think certainly the feeling between the Truss camp and the Sunak camps are not amicable. I think it ended quite badly. It was felt to be a bitter campaign. I actually didn't think it was as bitter as it could have been. I thought perhaps a bit nastier would have been even better. But I'd be interested. Is Nick gone? I'd be interested to know
he's still here.
Whether Nick has picked up any sort of immediate animosity among the people he knows in the Tory party.
Who's prickling Nick?
Well, I think at the moment there's quite a lot of focus on Rishi and his supporters. I actually think it's quite unlikely that they're suddenly going to become this huge awkward squad. They obviously disagree. The dividing line in the election campaign was largely one between fiscal conservatism and a kind of Reaganism where you cut taxes regardless of the deficit. So they disagree. But if you look at the character and temperament of a lot of those people, they're not born rebels. I think if there is a problem with them, they may just go a bit quiet, a bit sullen. They may not contribute in ways that they might otherwise, but they're not necessarily going to start some kind of big rebellion. I think the big question actually really is Liz has attracted a lot of support from the right of the party, who I think are hoping for something that's quite sort of ideologically neat. But the reality of government is much more complex. There's more nuance. You have to be pragmatic. She's already about to adopt an absolutely huge intervention when it comes to the energy crisis. The more she does things that sort of maybe don't match their ideological templates, there maybe will be some kind of frustration that she's maybe sort of selling out and a bit of grumpiness about the difference between how she campaigned and how she operates in government.
Today, Freddie, she's on show. She's exposed Prime Minister's questions.
Yes, I'm a little apprehensive about how that's going to go. I think the speech last night was pretty wooden. It was not very well written, I didn't think. I think she did show in some of the debates, she's quite good at counter-punching. You'll remember a few moments with Rishi Sunak where she really hit him back quite hard, so she may be pretty good at that. And Keir Starmer isn't the best.
Yeah.
So in terms of performance, I think it's possible that she'll freeze up like she did in that first debate in the leadership contest, and she'll sort of start looking very stilted and awkward. But yes, I think it'll be a big test for her, and I'm concerned about how she'll perform.
Freddie, she's going to be asked and grilled by Starmer on things like energy bills, but she can't surely at this point have that much detail to provide. It's going to be more thematic, isn't it?
He likes his detail, doesn't he?
Well, and I think Labour have got to figure out what their attack line is, because at the moment they have two that are contradictory. One is that she's a crazy low-tax ideologue that will sort of drive Britain into some terrible future. And the other is that she doesn't really stand for anything at all. And she's got to be one or the other. She can't be both.
We'll have to see how she wins over the House. Nick, if you're still there, we've talked a little bit about Liz's perception with her party. What about the public? Is there going to be this honeymoon period where we all get behind her? And if so, how long might that last for?
Well, I mean, it is obviously clear. Freddie mentioned the gloomsters and the gloom spiral, but, she does face an incredibly difficult inheritance, and one that is not really comparable to lots of other recent prime ministers. So there isn't much time for a really prolonged honeymoon. She's going to be straight into handling the energy crisis. That said, she's not very well known by the public, and that is an opportunity. I agree with Freddie. I thought the speech yesterday was a bit too light. I thought that was an opportunity where she could have really introduced herself to the country, and she didn't quite do it. But in these early decisions, she gets an opportunity to show the country what she's about, whether she's decisive, whether she's ponderous, but most importantly, whether she shares their values and whether she's acting, with the public in mind, or whether, as Labour would paint it, she's representing corporate interests and things like that.
Yeah,
that's the other contradictory thing for Labour. They're stuck in this bind where they're not sure whether to attack her as the same old Tories, or whether this is some kind of weird ideological departure. And the first argument makes it difficult to argue for an early election, which is, I'm sure, what Keir Starmer will say the country needs today. But the second argument makes it easier to say.
Nick Timothy, thank you very much indeed. Nick's a former Downing Street Chief of Staff. Really appreciate your take and analysis, Nick. Thank you. Freddie Gray, final word. You see over the front pages of many of the newspapers, together we can ride out the storm. Euphemisms, just words, or do you believe her?
There was a lot of cliche, wasn't there, yesterday? I mean, Aspiration Nation was a phrase that has always made me cringe a bit. And also, unfortunately, it rhymes with inflation. So I think Inflation Nation may be the defining theme of her premiership. But I hope not, for everyone.
For everyone. Freddie Gray,
thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Freddie's the Deputy Editor of The Spectator.
Well, we can see members of the very new, fresh cabinet arriving at number 10 this morning. But let's get a bit of analysis on those key appointments and what policies we can expect from them in the next few months. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is at the Home Office. Mark, a very good morning. Let's start with you first. New minister in position. What do you think? What are we going to expect from them?
Well, we certainly got from Liz Truss, of course, last night, the appointment of her cabinet throughout the evening yesterday, when we were expecting certainly that there would be those big cabinet secretaries, those states of office that would be announced, such as the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary and the Chancellor. But right across cabinet, she was making the appointments. And the Home Secretary, of course, one of those big offices of state, Suella Braverman, I should say, the new Home Secretary, wasted no time. As soon as she was appointed, she came here to Marsham Street, to Home Office headquarters, and met the Permanent Secretary, no doubt to discuss the job ahead for her, which is an almighty task, really. Uppermost, I think, in terms of the priorities for the Home Office going forward, is to try to get a grip on the small boats crisis. We are now well over 27,500 people who have come across the English Channel in the last year, which is just less than 1,000 short now for those who came the whole of last year. So given that, of course, we've still got 4 months left to run, and arguably some of the busiest months in terms of channel crossings, it is a priority for her. Interestingly, Suella Braverman, in her election campaign, because of course she stood for leadership of the Conservative Party initially, was suggesting that yes, if we had to, we might have to come out of the European Convention on Human Rights, which many people see as a block to the Rwanda policy, that policy of sending a number of asylum seekers who come across here to Rwanda for processing, effectively on a one-way ticket. That is now at the centre of a legal dispute, and we don't expect a decision on that for quite some time, perhaps into November before we get a decision. So she might have to take more radical action. We'll no doubt hear from her during the course of the day, but first of all, of course, is that crucial first cabinet meeting she has to attend.
Just about to get underway. Mark White, thank you very much, our Home and Security Editor. Well, let's move now to the economy. Our Business and Economics Editor, Liam Halligan, joins us in the studio. Liz Truss has got mounting energy bills, inflation, and we've got a new Chancellor at the helm.
It's a pretty big inbox, to say the least, and Liz Truss has appointed as Chancellor somebody who came into the House of Commons with her in 2010. They're very much political soulmates, Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss. They're both from the right of the party, though Kwarteng was a Brexiteer and Liz Truss famously voted Remain before doing a kind of post-referendum handbrake turn. Kwasi Kwarteng is a really smart guy, in my opinion. I've known him for many years. He's a trained historian. He's got a PhD from Cambridge. He's got a kind of gilded CV, but he doesn't come from a particularly gilded background. His parents came to Britain from Ghana in the early 1960s. They worked very hard. Kwasi Kwarteng grew up in a part of North London close to me before he won a scholarship, a highly competitive scholarship to Eton, and then he went on to Cambridge. I think what we're going to see here, Rosie, at least I think what Downing Street wants us to predict, is a kind of Cameron-Osborne relationship between number 10 and number 11. Two people who are very close politically, who don't fall out, whose teams don't brief against each other. That certainly wasn't the case when I cut my teeth in political reporting during the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown era. There was a kind of complete breakdown in relations. And even towards the end of the Boris Johnson premiership, relations with the Treasury were not good. This is a very difficult time. The Prime Minister is the First Lord of the Treasury. That's the sign that appears on Downing Street. But relationships with number 11, hugely important. So that's why she's really appointed a soulmate there.
She says we can ride out the storm. Well, the new cabinet who are arriving, and if you're watching on the TV, we've got live pictures of the cabinet arriving at number 10 right now. If they're going to ride out the storm, financially, that's going to be the biggest problem. And we're looking at this energy bills plan that they might have. It's going to cost probably more than furlough. How are they going to marry all of this up?
Well, they've got choices. They can borrow all the money on financial markets. I think that will be tough because, as you say, it could cost between 70 and 100 billion pounds just for a year. We spend about 150 billion pounds a year on the NHS. We were due to borrow 100 billion pounds a year anyway, so we'd end up doubling the amount of government borrowing. The financial markets might not like that. The pound is still rattling around at the lowest it's been against the dollar since 1985. That's bad for inflation. It makes our imports more expensive. It's not necessarily a bad thing, though, as long as it doesn't really plummet, because it makes our exports more competitive. I think all in all, as long as she can get growth going, as long as she can keep the economy expanding, then the markets will give her the benefit of the doubt. But it's definitely a risk that she's taking.
Liam, just let me briefly interrupt you as we bring in David Miller, who's watching this beauty pageant going down. It's a walk that you had to do yourself as a cabinet member, chief secretary to the Treasury under Margaret Thatcher.
I must just say, if you're listening on the radio, that's what those loud cheers are. It's as members of the cabinet arrive and journalists sort of haranguing them for questions.
I'm not sure it's all cheers either.
So that is her lineup. How important is it that she gets it right from the start?
Well, she hasn't got much room to get it wrong, has she? I mean, how long has she got to get a grip on this? And what Liam has been saying, I mean, I was Chief Secretary of the Treasury. I have to tell you that I'm appalled by these figures. I mean, they start with a commitment to spend a vast amount of money on the energy crisis, and they don't have anything to cover this bear.
Yeah, except, as Liam was pointing out, Liam, and I want to know this, you said the markets responded positively to what sort of companies are we talking about here? Was the entertainment companies?
Well, it's Greg's, Domino's Pizza, Toby Carvery and Harvester.
Right, so here's my point. I would put it to you, Liam, that all the exact companies that rose on the stock market is the stuff people will cut back on, because you're going to ask yourself, will I make it myself or have I got the money to order the takeaway?
If you think the world of politics is fickle, Eamonn, you want to spend a bit more time in financial markets because, look, the reason the markets responded positively for now is because finally, after months of urging by journalists like me, you get the sense that the government realises it has to do something to stop thousands of companies going bankrupt when their energy bills triple and quadruple because there has been no energy price cap for firms. Yesterday, we got the first inkling from the government that the Thursday energy support package will help businesses to some degree. That's why you've seen the stock markets respond positively. The really important thing is whether or not she maintains a steady level of sterling, whether or not in the long run the markets continue to want to borrow to lend money to the British government as they extend their borrowing. And yesterday, this isn't something you're going to hear on many mainstream broadcasts, but if I say yesterday the 10-year gilt yield went above 3.1% for the first time since after the global financial crisis, what I'm saying there, Eamonn, in plain language, is it's just become a lot more expensive for the British government to borrow.
That's exactly the point. And you get into a situation as the country got into in the 70s, when the cost of servicing your debt became one of the biggest items of public expenditure, and that was a dreadful situation.
Can you see history repeating itself?
Yes, of course. But I think a lot will depend on Liz Truss. A lot will depend on whether she can carry conviction and take the country with her. I would love to feel more confident than I do, but I felt it's been a bad start Obviously not wanting to be friendly to Sunak. That's stupid when he ran her so close. Not wanting to have people who are in his cabinet in her cabinet. I mean, we're supposed to be the same party, for God's sake.
But I tell you what's unusual. A Prime Minister and a Chancellor who are not at each other's throats, because we believe that there will be a good working relationship, a good personal relationship between Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng.
I know both these people, professionally. I've known them for many years. They do get on really well. They are ideologically, politically close. As I said, they came into the House together during those early years, 2010, 2011, 2012. Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss, both pretty scholarly people, wrote a series of books and pamphlets with other incoming new generation MPs, if you like. But all relationships are tested when the going gets tough. And I personally think that this autumn, as I've been saying and writing for months and months and months, there will be a moment of reckoning. The public sector unions will really test out Liz Truss in a serious way as teachers and health workers decide whether or not to strike. There's certainly the rumblings there now in response to the pay review bodies. And how is the mainstream media going to react to that? How are the broadcasters going to react to that? Are they going to see Liz Truss as a person of conviction who can face down these vested interests, or are they just going to try and shoo her out the door?
And if I could just quickly agree with Liam, it is an absolutely vital relationship. And when it works, as it did at the beginning of Margaret Thatcher's time with Geoffrey Howe and with Nigel Lawson later on, that was fine. But when the relationship with Nigel Lawson and Margaret Thatcher collapsed, the whole government went with it. And what prevented Tony Blair being a really outstanding Prime Minister? The fact he was constantly at war with Gordon Brown, and that drove a stake into the heart of the government.
OK, well, so thanks for highlighting the importance of that relationship. Gentlemen, we say goodbye to both of you. Well, David will be back very shortly with the papers. We go to Tom Harwood for his thoughts. He's there. He's at Downing Street and he has watched the arrivals this morning. Tom, tell us more.
Yes, we've seen the vast majority of the cabinet turn up and they're looking pretty sprightly. This is a relatively unified cabinet, of course, people who've been backing Liz Truss or at the very least neutral in this leadership contest. The real problem for Liz Truss will be what happens on her backbenches, a united cabinet with few detractors, but that does mean that there are a number of big beasts on the backbenches not brought into the tent. Could that be a problem for Liz Truss in the future? Now, I'm going to keep a close eye on what's going on behind me because there are still a few cabinet ministers to turn up at number 10. We've yet to see Penny Mordaunt. We've yet to see Kemi Badenoch. And yet we have seen some of the other big beasts arrive in the last few minutes. We've seen the new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, walking towards that door. We've been seeing, of course, the new Foreign Secretary, and indeed we have seen the new Home Secretary as well. Some of those biggest roles in Cabinet have all turned up for this 8:30 meeting, and I'm just keeping a close eye on the three entrances that these individuals are coming from, not just from the main gates of Downing Street, but also we're seeing entrances right through from the Foreign Office side of things and through the back gates as well. So we're all on tenterhooks here to see who will be the next person to turn up. Interestingly, when the Defence Secretary and his more junior minister, that's Ben Wallace and James Heapy, walked up this street together, I asked how would they pay for the extra defence spending that this government is pledging, the uplift in defence budgets. And Ben Wallace turned to me and said, ask the Chancellor. So perhaps this is going to be a bit of a theme of this government. Lots of commitments that may well balloon the deficit. Of course, we're expecting all of this energy help, potentially over 100 billion pounds of spending commitments there. Big questions about how it will all be funded. We do know that Liz Truss is more relaxed about short-term borrowing in the context of this crisis, but she did commit in the leadership election to start getting that borrowing down and getting that deficit down after 3 years. So it will be interesting to see how this is followed through, the agenda for growth of this government as well being something something that is very high on the list of priorities. Allegedly, or indeed reportedly, Liz Truss has been asking the Treasury team to pick out the areas of growth in all of their different areas of responsibility, to really focus on and boost the United Kingdom's growth. 2.5% is where they want to get this country to, 2.5% growth a year. That's up from the sclerotic 0.5% growth we have been experiencing over recent years.
Thank you very much. Live for us outside number 10. A few arrivals still to come before that cabinet meeting gets underway. Liz Truss's new top team. Tom, thank you very much. Who hasn't arrived yet is...
Who are the latecomers? Name and shame.
New International Trade Secretary, who was running to have Liz Truss's job, Kemi Badenoch. But she left her house early, and this is what she had to say.
Congratulations, Minister. How do you feel starting your new role?
Oh, very excited, thank you.
Some people are disappointed you're not Education Secretary. Were you offered that role?
I'm very happy with being Secretary of State for International Trade.
Can Liz Truss unite the party? It was a very divisive leadership contest.
Yes, of course she can.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Well, will
just
she?
Sort of don't want to be entering the classroom when the cabinet meeting starts at 8:30, a couple of minutes late on first day, do you?
No, you don't.
You don't really?
Well, big moments today, because not only that first cabinet meeting, of course, it's Wednesday. Parliament are definitely not in recess. It's all change. Prime Minister's questions. We'll bring that to you live here on GB News, so you'll get all the analysis here as well with Gloria and Mark. But we'll bring you up to speed with what we think is happening in that cabinet meeting.
We've got the papers. We're going to take a short break. We're back with David Miller and Emma Burnell, and they've got the newspapers, so you don't have to read them after this.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Here come your newspapers on this Wednesday morning in the company of David Miller and Emma Burnell with these. And Emma, I'd like to just broaden it out. I think we're politics mad and we're domestic politics mad at the minute, but there are other things going on in the world. And often the pain, as Boris Johnson said yesterday, as he called it, and I think Liz Truss continued the phrase, Putin's war, they called it. But you're dealing with, and this is in the Mirror, Putin's mutineers.
Yes, there's a very large battalion. I think it's the 127th, but don't quote me on that, she says on television, who have said that they won't go further. They're basically on strike. about some of the same things that strikes are happening here. It's about pay and it's about conditions. They are being asked to live in quite incredibly squalid. I mean, being on the front line is always very difficult, but
we're not supposed to have sympathy for them, are we?
I mean, I'm not sympathising with them individually, but if you think about the effect that kind of low morale of the Russian troops is going to have, if they've got to the point where we in the West know about them going on this basically strike, morale across the Russian army is incredibly low. And that can only be a good thing for both the Ukrainian army and their likely victory.
David, what about our commitment to Ukraine? Liz Truss, her first phone call wasn't to the American president, it was to the Ukrainian president yesterday, and she's accepted an invite from him to be visible, to be there in Ukraine again. Now, the Tory party, will they like that? Do they like a bit of that jingoism, or do they, is it necessary? What's your view on that?
I don't think they see it as jingoism, and nor do I. I think what they see it as is rallying round a country that we want to retain its independence, but also Ukraine is doing a great job for the West. It's proving that a lot of what the Russians leaders, what Putin says was bull, and that the Russians do not have an all-powerful army. In fact, the Russian army has been humiliated in Ukraine, and that doesn't make Putin any less dangerous. It might make him more than ready to push the button.
At what point do you step in and negotiate a deal? Do we sit here and talk? There's just no talk of any ceasefires being brokered or any end to this?
I think the problem with that is that Putin apparently doesn't want that. And it's certainly, the worrying thing about this is that, God's chosen instruments, the Chancellor of Germany and the President of France, will be only too keen to cozy up to Putin, given half a chance. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is it a better world with or without Putin? And even a chastened Putin, if he was, who'd gone to the peacemaking table, is not going to be a reliable person. There is no happy outcome for the world with Putin still in place. And whatever we can do to bring him down, we should do.
How do you think Liz is going to handle that? Because she's come in from a position where she was already dealing on the diplomatic stage, internationally, Foreign Secretary. How is she going to handle it as Prime Minister?
Well, hopefully in the same way that she did as Foreign Secretary. She had this awful man Lavrov. I think he's probably a really, truly dreadful man, the Foreign Minister of Russia, and he was contemptuous of her. And I think she should give him reason to think differently than contempt about her or about the UK. It's deeply regrettable that this has happened, but good comes out of bad if it cuts the Russians down to size.
OK. We'll go to the domestic political front now, Emma, and I want to ask both of you. David has chosen front page of the Times, where Liz Truss talks about we can ride out this storm together. Do you think we can? How long do you give her in the job?
Well, I don't think the question is how long I give her in the job. That Times story has an extraordinary unnamed quote from someone who is in her cabinet, by the sounds of it, saying that she probably won't last 2 years.
Yeah.
If that's what your closest allies are saying about you, what critics like me say probably doesn't matter either way.
And this is a Sunak-free zone as well. So this would be one of her so-called buddies, would it not, David?
It's a gossipy place, but the Times, the political editor, the policy editor and the Whitehall editor all put their names in this story. So I would be disposed to think that unnamed cabinet minister did say that. And of course, there's also, the sentence above says, the reshuffle led to warnings over party unity, with the wife of one ousted minister accusing Truss of being an imbecile and of giving her mates jobs. This is not the start she would have wanted.
No, and I feel the Tory party is proving themselves almost ungovernable, but certainly from a low bar, she seems to be sinking. There are...
How can you come to that conclusion already?
Because she's not... basically, you're supposed to start with a honeymoon, And if she's got a honeymoon where the front page of a generally Conservative Party supporting newspaper is carrying quotes from a newly appointed cabinet minister saying that she won't last 2 years, that's not a honeymoon. That's
It's
a wet
one
weekend
quote in a fairly lengthy article, which does lead with her sentiments saying, we can ride out the storm.
Of course, but this is what I'm saying. In a positive story, if you've even at that point, on this day one, starting with that quote, you can only go down from there.
There was an alternative. She could have gone up to Sunak the moment the result was announced, embraced him and said, now, Rishi, let's get on with our work together. And she could have said to everybody who, was a lot of participation in the leadership election, those people, she wants to join her in the cabinet. She wants to create a cabinet, a one-nation cabinet, in order to run a one-nation government for a one-nation country. If she'd started off like that, she could have given herself a start. As it is, she's appeared to be a narrow, spiteful partisan with no particular ability. That's her problem.
Well, the
Let's
cabinet
talk
we're meeting about now.
We're going to talk about something much more positive. And I'm fascinated by this, Emma. A lot of people will be autistic. A lot of people have autistic people in their family, and they're aware of how complicated that can be. So we go to television programmes. Thomas the Tank Engine is getting his first openly autistic friend.
Yes, I think this is lovely. There's going to be Bruno the brake car, who is an autistic character in Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas the Tank Engine has lots and lots of characters, and it's been going for so long now. It's part of our British culture heritage. It's lovely to see just a little bit of extra representation of kids who, it's important that people see themselves. And it's actually represented by an autistic child actor, a little kid called Elliot Garcia.
But what I think's really good is that they're open about Bruno, and they say Bruno worries at times. He's a bit anxious, the timetable's not right, if things aren't there. And as you say, this lad, Elliot, is himself autistic.
So he'll really relate to that, and as will autistic kids in the audience. And I think telling autistic kids, we know that you worry about things, and that's okay, and there are things to worry about, but there are things to not worry about. So I think it's nice to reassure kids that they're not, they have a particular condition, but they're not normal.
Coming to screens soon, Thomas the Tank Engine with a very different cast, which obviously has been
this month, Thomas and Friends, All Engines Go, Channel 5, yeah?
All engines go.
Love it.
Let's turn our attention to the US if we can, and in the Mail, David. These documents from the Mar-a-Lago raid, more details coming out about what actually was contained in them.
Well, what seems to have been contained in them is a lot of such top-secret material that only the president and a few others would have ever received them. And he made off down to Mar-a-Lago with all these documents and was holding on to them until, in an unprecedented move, the FBI raided a former president's home. He's now saying, I think these were planted, which is, of course, what every criminal...
Which is what you would expect him to say, isn't it?
Why do you think he held on to them? Was it kind of trophies of his presidency? Was it kind of a status
Or is it to be able
thing?
to say about President Macron, I've got things on his private life?
Yes, well, I'm sure he probably has. But the point is, Trump is, a person who should not have been within a million miles of the presidency. And Trump behaves throughout his business life in a totally reckless way.
I think the people who voted for him would disagree with you there, David.
No, they would, but it doesn't mean they're right. In a totally reckless way. And, when I talk about Boris and what sort of impact is Boris going to have on Liz Truss, we've seen the impact that a sort of big rogue bull elephant has on the American political system. And Trump is really destroying the American political system because he is destroying the credibility of the Republican Party.
Yes,
and
but
the American system depends on having two credible
has he not
public
set
parties.
a normalisation whereby other people, when they behave, other leaders behave in a certain way, and they're not judged as harshly or as dismissively as they perhaps should have been, because they're being compared to, as we would say in Ireland, the on-Egypt Trump?
Yeah, I do see all of that, but the reality is that Trump is not going to go quietly any more than Boris is going to go quietly. But Trump could be in quite big trouble. First of all, because a lot of what he has done in relation to those documents is probably criminal. I mean, he could, as president, have declassified those documents, but he didn't trouble to do that. And the other problem he's got, of course, is all the problems over his businesses and the rickety way in which they finance themselves. But, I mean, watch this space, because Trump is not going to go anywhere quietly, including if it comes to this, and it could well do, to prison.
Guys, here's a story in The Sun. This is page 26 in The Sun. And I genuinely think, I'm not giving it for a laugh or whatever.
I've just seen a glimpse of the headline.
I suggested this, and I was told that it was not a good one to talk about. I think they're worried about you.
By who? Well, that's some idiot that doesn't know what's... Well, I'm telling you, this is a really interesting story, and I'll tell you why, because this is what is on our television channels and why stations like GB News are quite popular, because people, they are specialised and they give people what they want to hear. But think about, each one of us think about what you watch on television, and I'll say to you, I find it very hard to name. I know that I have odd tastes. I watch documentaries, I watch a lot of sport, I watch news. I sat last night to relax watching a Sky Arts documentary on...
Not the football.
I watched Celtic and Real Madrid, but after that I then watched a documentary on directors, Brian De Palma, who it was there, so film directors, and I'm very interested in cinematic history and World War II and various things like that. Do I find anything for me on mainstream TV? No. I find it very, very hard. So here is the survey we're talking about. Apparently, and I think this is really sad, people prefer television, in whatever form it is, to sex, right? So sex comes... having sex came in at a lowly 8th place on a happiness index. Well, I just sort of think, right, tell me what is happier, what is better in life? Because I don't know.
It's very early in the morning, but I probably watch TV more often than I have sex, slightly. But I definitely would say the latter makes me happier.
Yes, you wouldn't sit and choose. You would say The Repair Shop, which is say what people watch. I think The Repair Shop is an excellent programme.
It's a lovely programme.
Yeah, but...
Yeah. I've got a problem here. My deaf aid has gone off and I can't hear a word of what's being said. Which is perhaps just as well.
I wish I could join you, David. Yes.
I'm going to rip it out for you, right? Okay. So there it is. So I'll ask you, David, what do you...
I mean, I can actually hear it. I just want
he
to
just
pretend
doesn't want to.
I'm a serious
in
person.
In the car doing the school run, listening on the radio, maybe you can feign ignorance like David too.
What do you watch on TV, Rosie?
Me? I watch documentaries, definitely. I really like a drama. I've recently been watching...
You like these special events, so therefore something like Netflix. I mean, the one thing I would say, Margaret Thatcher, I wouldn't think was a good thing when she sort of deregularised TV and gave us all those channels with absolutely nothing on them. I just don't think that was a good thing.
But I got to tell you that one of the things that I have enjoyed is the opportunity to get to know television from other places. I'm obsessed. Partner and I are obsessed with Scandi Noirs. I'm working my way to... Now, have you ever had
I'm going to be the one to say I watch terrible television.
Yeah?
When I...
Like Kardashians and...
Not the Kardashians,
Love Island.
But absolutely Love Island, Married at First Sight. I want to be on Married at First Sight. I'd love it. I'd love it. I love all that stuff. And honestly, when I work really, really hard, I close my computer.
Yeah.
I want something that I don't have to think about. And yes, I would love to be on it as a contestant. I've hardly succeeded on my own. Let's face it, I need the help.
Yeah.
And clearly, so do lots of other Brits if they're watching telly rather than getting on with other things.
My point in general here is that I just think it's quite sad if people think television comes before...
Intimacy.
Intimacy.
Yes.
That's a good word. That's a good word, Rosie. Thank you. Listen, it's been a joy, as always. Emma and David, thank you very much indeed. Really, really good listening to your views on things. And always let us have your views. You can join in the conversation as well. You can email us or you can tweet as well.
Right now, it's coming up to 10 minutes to 9. Now, Liz Truss's proposed plan to freeze energy bills this winter will and should hopefully come as a relief to many small restaurants and pubs. Of course, we don't know the detail yet.
So all of this comes as 6 of the biggest food and drink companies signed an open letter urging the Prime Minister to act now to save British pubs. This is a serious danger. James Alcock, we go to him now. James is the owner of the Pig and Whistle Bistro in Yorkshire. Award-winning it is. And And James, do you know what, something? I went to football on Sunday and I sat beside a guy who owned a pub. And do you know what his solution to all of this was? I'll be interested to what you have to say, James. He says, I don't serve food anymore. The way pubs used to be, people go to them for a drink, and he does not serve hot food, therefore he doesn't have to worry about the energy costs with that, and he doesn't worry about having to pay staff. I know it's not your business, but what do you think of the solution?
I think wet-led pubs have really struggled, and like you said, it's not really my business, so it wouldn't be necessarily something that I'm an expert on. I would find it very challenging to say that all pubs could operate like that, though. I think food for some of these pubs is the primary thing to do. I mean, my business has gone from overnight paying £3,000 a year to £23,000 a year, which, quite simply, to put that into perspective for a small business like mine, that's more than we take in a month. We simply don't operate with those level of profits. And to cover that increase, we don't have enough cash in the business. You know, I've worked out it's going to cost me £125 a day to turn the heating on alone in winter. That's going to turn small profit-making midweek days into huge loss-making days. I mean, talking of pubs and beer, it's going to cost me £2 an hour to cool draft beer. I sit 22 people in my bistro. How's that even viable? The commercial solution for me for hospitality is obvious, simple and deliverable. We need an energy price cap from Liz Truss, and that needs to be at yesterday's rate, not tomorrow's rate. It's little or no use to me freezing it at the tip of the iceberg. And VAT needs reducing on food to 5% and 10% on alcohol. And the overhaul antiquated business rate system is key as well. But those types of VAT cuts are things that we've been campaigning for since pre-COVID. This is a new solution to an old problem. But business needs security. We need 1 and 2 year plans, and we deserve more than sticking plasters on broken legs like COVID. If these plans are only from the next quarter from Liz Truss, then it's simply not good enough. She's a PM for me who's going to be judged on one thing, and that's energy and energy alone.
Yeah.
And if this support isn't good enough, it's going to be like trying to bail the Titanic out with a teacup.
James, what have you been doing in the meantime? We are expecting to hear something from Liz Truss tomorrow, but are you putting prices up? Are you opening for shorter hours? Kind of what have you done to try and mitigate against these, for you particularly, astronomical price rises?
Well, as a business, we've already been dealing with inflation running at nearly 10%. You know, I've got suppliers putting price increases on me week on week for anything between 7 and 11%. These prices are changing week on week. Like I said, prices to me used to hold for 3 to 6 months, sometimes even a year. So it's a real moving picture at the minute. And it's not just as simple as putting prices up, because I've already had to do that due to inflation. You can price yourself out the market. And I think certain guests will come to a point in restaurants where it's not that they can't pay. You know, they simply won't pay even if they can, because it just becomes far too expensive. And I look at plates of food, I know the produce we use is fantastic, and I look at them and think, God, do we really have to charge that? That's a lot of money for that dish, and I know what goes into it. I'm thinking that guests must pay.
I totally get what you're saying there. And at the end of the day, money talks, and people will go and there'll be, 4 of them, and they'll say, we'll go out for Sunday lunch or whatever. And then they see a bill. Goodness knows how much it'll jump by. But what would you charge for a Sunday lunch? A roast potato, beef and Yorkshire pudding, whatever it is, whatever you serve up for your Sunday lunch, what would that be?
I mean, it's not something we do as a business, but that type of food is something I've certainly seen increase in the local area. But my most popular main course, now this isn't necessarily increase to the customer, but that's cost me 35% more to make in the last 12 months. We don't make enough margin on those dishes.
What is your popular course?
We do lots of charcuterie and cheese sharing boards. So we're a bit of a bistro that serves tapas, cured meats and cheeses.
Yeah, OK. So that's cold. That's a cold dish served there. And what would that cost?
So that's gone up in cost to me for 35%. But if you look at my business over the last 5 years, that dish was £22.50 5 years ago. Over the years, it's now £37.50.
Yeah,
and should even be over £40. I mean, it's inordinate.
I'd give it a miss. I would give it a miss. Don't go anywhere, because there's political things happening, and the International Trade Secretary turned up late for school today, Kemi Badenoch. We go to Tom Harwood. We'll be coming back to you, James, very, very shortly. Here he is at Downing Street. Tom?
Yes, the front door to Downing Street has closed. All of the new cabinet ministers are now inside the building, and Kemi Badenoch was the last one to walk through that door 21 minutes after the first cabinet meeting of Liz Truss was meant to begin. I asked her as she was walking in whether this means that the trade deals that the United Kingdom is expected to do this year, for example, the Indian trade deal that Boris Johnson promised would be done by Diwali, I asked, would that be late too? She didn't reply, but yes, now it's safe to say that this first cabinet meeting of Liz Truss is underway, and we will get back to you as soon as we hear any readout from what they're discussing.
Speak shortly, Tom. Thank you very much indeed. Finally, James Alcock, owner and chef, Pig and Whistle in East Riding, with what we were talking about there. Tom, I always say about lots of things that will be priced out of existence or people want closed and whatever. Bad for the hospitality industry. How much will society miss you when you're gone, and how close are you and your colleagues from going?
I mean, I'll need some sort of support from government, but I'll obviously make changes internally. If you were talking to me last week, I'd have been talking about the recruitment crisis. I've been looking for a full-time member of staff now for 18 months. That's obviously on pause, and that's going to plug some of the gap, but not all of it. And this is far more than just cooking creatively. We are going to need support from the government. But let's not forget, this isn't just some tin pot industry. 1 in 10 people work in hospitality. We contribute £12.1 billion in wages. We can't and won't be ignored. And the high street would be a very sad place without these restaurants. We work in the community, lots with food banks. We do more than just a business. We're the lifeblood of the community for lots of people.
Thank you so much for talking to us and
Good luck.
Really explaining the pain of getting those plates and those pints out to the public. Really appreciate your time. And if anyone wants that sharing platter, they now know where to come. Right now, it is coming up to 9 o'clock. What a morning it's been. A new Prime Minister, a new Cabinet meeting, as Tom's just told us, underway. And later on, the first Prime Minister's questions for Liz Truss.
And we'll have a few questions for former Home Secretary, and that is Alan Johnson. He's now a best-selling author. What's his secret? We'll tell you right after the weather.
Good morning. Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's more showers today. Yes, there'll be some sunny spells between the heavy downpours, but again, where we see the heavy showers, they could well turn into thunderstorms. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads this morning. Here's the reason why: a slow-moving area of low pressure just churning away just to the southwest of Ireland and throwing bands of heavy showers our way. It is a bright, sunny start for some, but if you've got blue skies, just keep an eye out the window, because quite quickly this morning the cloud will start to bubble up and the showers won't be too far away. We'll have that mixture of sunshine and showers for pretty much all parts through the rest of the day. Staying fairly cloudy and wet across Shetland, but some brighter spells elsewhere. But where we see those showers, heavy downpours, thunderstorms possible, could cause a bit of disruption and potential for local flooding in a few spots. It's still quite mild, though, out there this morning, and by this afternoon, temperatures getting into the low 20s in the sunny spells. But more heavy showers to come this evening. You can see them still spiralling around. It's quite gusty winds through today and tonight across South Wales, southwest England, and across northern Scotland. Again, it'll be a pretty mild night tonight, even with clear skies. Temperatures likely to stay in the teens, certainly in most urban areas. And again, on Thursday, it's a case of watching the downpours develop after what could be a largely fine start, certainly for southwest Scotland, northwest England. But more showers likely, I think, tomorrow across parts of Wales, the Midlands and southern England. Some more for East Anglia too, and perhaps some more persistent rain at times, just affecting the east coast of Scotland, where there'll be a brisk breeze coming in from the North Sea, keeping the temperatures pegged back on the beaches here. But elsewhere, again, we'll see a bit of sunshine between the showers and highs of 19 to 21 Celsius. The low pressure responsible is still with us on Friday. More heavy showers then, but it is also moving away. So it looks a lot drier for most of us by Saturday. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Liz Truss chairs her first cabinet meeting. It's underway now as she prepares for her first Prime Minister's questions, which will happen at noon.
Well, a very good morning. It's just gone 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of September, Liz Truss's first full day as Prime Minister. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Rosie Wright. Thanks
for tuning in to us. Here's what's leading the news this morning. Newly appointed Prime Minister Liz Truss is at this moment chairing the first meeting of her new cabinet.
Amongst those in attendance will be her new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and the Foreign Secretary, newly appointed James Cleverly.
So all of this happening as she prepares to go head-to-head with Sir Keir Starmer for the first time during Prime Minister's questions later today. Meanwhile,
shares in British hospitality and retail businesses rose yesterday in the wake of Truss's appointment, ahead of an announcement on an energy support package that we're anticipating will come tomorrow.
House prices slightly up. They have increased by 0.4% month on month. New figures out this morning reveal that a typical British property now costs nearly £300,000.
Please do get in touch. What do you make of our new PM? What do you want to hear from her at PMQs? Let us know. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
So the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is chairing her first cabinet meeting as PM. We go live to Downing Street. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood has been watching the arrivals.
I have indeed, and it's been, of course, a cabinet of loyalists that we saw appointed last night. A very smooth appointment process for this cabinet. No big hiccups, everything going as expected. Everything going, frankly, as was briefed to the Sunday newspapers over the weekend. This was a fairly steady, meticulous operation, and one that rewarded loyalists and, frankly, froze out those who supported effusively Rishi Sunak. Now, this cabinet meeting had one slight hiccup this morning, however. The Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, turned up 21 minutes late to number 10. And my sources inside the building tell me that the cabinet meeting started without her. So it must have been a fairly awkward squeezing into the back there of the cabinet meeting after it had got going for the new Trade Secretary, but everyone else turned up between 9 and 9:30. I managed to ask some of the new cabinet ministers a bit about their brief. When the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, was walking up the street, I asked, how is he going to pay for all this new defence spending that is being promised, up from 2% of GDP to 3% of GDP by the end of the decade. That's the Liz Truss pledge. Well, the Defence Secretary told me it was for the Chancellor to find the money, not him. So potentially a lot put onto the shoulders of Kwasi Kwarteng, one of the most staunch allies of Liz Truss, and someone who has moved now into number 11 Downing Street. I asked him when these tax cuts were coming as he was walking in to Downing Street. He just smiled, and I suppose we can assume that'll be for a fiscal statement later this year.
Tom, thank you very much. Live from Downing Street for us on a very, well, exciting and day full of anticipation.
So, new appointments made, Cabinet in progress. Let's get analysis on those key appointments and what policies we can expect in the next few months. Here's our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark's at the Home Office. Mark.
Eamonn, good morning to you. Yes, we're expecting Suella Braverman to come here later this morning after Cabinet, of course, the new Home Secretary taking on that post with a lot of challenges in tray. Uppermost, of course, is the small boats crisis. Still, they continue to come across, even in very poor weather conditions yesterday and the day before, hundreds more people crossing the channel. And at the same time, at the High Court, we have this judicial review, a challenge against the government's policy brought by a number of asylum seekers, trade union, and of course human rights charities as well. A key test of whether the Rwandan policy, this policy of sending asylum seekers over to Rwanda on a one-way ticket, is lawful. If in the end it's deemed not to be lawful when the judges come back with their determination, it's back to the drawing board for Suella Braverman. Now, she did say during the election campaign, because remember, of course, she was standing at one point for the Tory leadership, that she would be prepared to consider pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights, which has been seen by many as a block to sending asylum seekers off to Rwanda because of human rights legislation that is used under the ECHR to challenge that in the British courts. So we've some wait before we find out exactly what that court decision is, but what we will hear, I have no doubt, in the coming days is a key list of priorities set out by Suella Braverman. I mentioned, of course, the small boats crisis, but it's not just that, of course. We have some real serious concerns about violent crime in some of our larger towns and cities.
Mark White, thank you very much. Outside the Home Office for us. Well, let's go from the office of the Home Office to the Chancellor. Instead, our Business and Economics Editor, Liam Halligan, joins us. Liam, we have a new Chancellor at the helm and an exceptionally stressful and busy in-tray.
It really is a very difficult in-tray. I can't think of a peacetime Prime Minister who's come into office with as many economic question marks hanging over the country. Tomorrow we're going to see, unless there's a delay, I'm expecting it tomorrow, the unveiling of an energy support package, not just for households, but crucially for firms as well. That's why those share prices went up, because there was a sense that firms weren't going to get any help with their energy bills, even though the Ofgem energy price cap doesn't apply to them. Look, this energy support package is going to be very controversial. If she gives support across the board, then she'll be slammed by some people for saying, why are you helping rich households? They can just have one less holiday at half term or whatever. If she gives energy support just to more vulnerable households, there'll be many hard cases, Rosie. People at the cusp who don't qualify for benefits. They may be, their household income's a couple of £1,000s more than the threshold. They won't get any help. People fall through the cracks and so on. So it is going to be a very, very difficult and complex policy announcement tomorrow.
It's going to be incredible. I don't know where she begins or what she can possibly do and what it's going to cost us all. I mean, we had a pub owner, a bistro pub owner, on there about 15 minutes ago. And I suppose what we're saying is it's not just about how each one of us survive individually. It's about how society is going to survive, how the high street's going to survive, how, you know, where you get your tyre changed for your car is going to survive, or get your laundry done or whatever.
I've been advocating this for months, Eamonn, here on GB News and my newspaper columns, that the political and media class have completely missed a trick by ignoring the impact of this energy crisis, particularly on businesses. You know, businesses are laundrettes, small restaurants, family-owned cafes, you know, cab companies, everything that makes the economy go round. And I'm astonished, actually, that ministers only in the last 24, 48 hours indicated that there will be any help for business at all. The big businesses, they can cope with this. They have sophisticated trading desks. They buy energy forward years ahead. The small business owners, even people, you know, employing 50, 100, 150 people, they just have to ring up the energy company on their hands and knees like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And the energy companies now are giving these businesses not a contract for a year where they can lock in and hopefully, you know, get their arms around the problem and try and finance. They're only allowing them to fix for 6 months. So that leads to massive uncertainties. The danger is that lots of businesses actually fold in the face of this. And that's why I think Liz Truss is going to be taking some risks. She's going to be taking some risks with the public finances. A lot of people won't like it, but I don't really see any alternative at this point.
OK, Liam, we'll talk again later. Thank you very much indeed.
And we'll get some of the detail, I expect, maybe in Prime Minister's questions that we'll bring you here on GB News. Now, later today, Manchester Crown Court will hear whether the former footballer Ryan Giggs will face a retrial in relation to assault allegations.
Well, this is after the jury failed to reach a verdict last week. Sophie Reefer is in Manchester for us to explain more. Sophie.
Well, good morning to you both. As you said, I'm outside Manchester Crown Court this morning, where in about an hour's time we'll be hearing whether or not former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs will face a retrial. He stands accused of assault and of coercive and controlling behaviour over his former girlfriend, Kate Greville. He denies all 3 of the charges. Now, when the jury in this case were originally sent out, they were unable to reach a unanimous verdict. So Judge Manley, the presiding judge in this case, said she would accept a majority of 10, which only left room for 1 juror to disagree. Now, even after 23 hours of deliberations, the jury were unable to reach that majority. And when they were asked, they said even if given more time, they felt they were going to be unable to reach that majority. So the judge dismissed them, and today we'll learn whether Ryan Giggs will face a retrial with a fresh jury, or if the case against him will be dismissed and he will be deemed not guilty. Now, if this does go to a retrial, the court heard last week that it may not be scheduled until next June, so it could be around 9 months before Ryan Giggs learns his fate in this matter.
Oh. Sophie, thank you very much indeed. 12 minutes now past the hour of 9 o'clock. You're tuned in to breakfast here on GB News this morning with Rosie and Eamonn.
Coming up, we're going to be speaking to the former Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, as Liz Truss's new cabinet meet for the first
But that's
time.
not why he's here. We're going to be talking to him about that, but he's got a book out, another book out. He writes books and he's very good at them. This is a thriller, a bit like the weather. Have a look.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Faraday.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
So the time's approaching 9:15. Hope your day's going well so far.
The new Prime Minister Liz Truss is currently chairing her first cabinet meeting ahead of Prime Minister's questions, which will happen at midday today.
Well, one man who's had more than one cabinet post in his political career, and he gave it all up to write books. He has been, education secretary. He's been the health secretary. He's been home secretary as well. He was even a postman in his time. So he's got a lot of experience to draw on. And we say good morning, hello, good morning, welcome to Alan Johnson. Alan, you haven't gone missing, but your book, your new thriller, One of Our Ministers has gone missing. One of our ministers is missing. That's pretty careless.
Well, recently it's felt like, I mean, I wrote that in 2017. If it was contemporary, it'd be called All of Our Ministers Are Missing, because that's what it's felt like over the last few months. Yeah, it's my new thriller, published last week and available in all good bookshops, as they say.
You know what? Before we go any further, and we're going to talk politics, we're going to talk a lot of that stuff as well, but we thought to ourselves, why not get a critic in that's read your books and say he's worried the colour has just drained. The colour has drained from his face there. You know this guy. It's Liam Halligan here as well. Liam, you are a genuine fan of Alan as an author.
Alan knows this. I've read Alan's... it was a trilogy. Now there are 4 of them, quadrilogy or whatever you call it, his memoirs. And I met Alan when I was a young political reporter on the Financial Times. And I've always admired his love of music. He's a pretty mean guitarist. But his autobiographies, this boy, about his life growing up in Notting Dale, it was then called, when Notting Hill wasn't posh, in working class London. His love of fashion, his love of music. This boy, then Please Mr. Postman, when he became a postman. Then The Long and Winding Road and In My Life. The last 2, of course, of those memoirs are Beatles songs, not least because Alan writes a lot about his life in bands and playing the electric guitar. He's got a huge collection of electric guitars. I know this is a thriller, but I wanted to say how it's really worth reading Alan Johnson's memoirs that preceded his thrillers.
He'll turn the UK economy around with that book alone, I would have thought. Alan, how did one of the ministers go missing? What's the premise?
Well, the premise is that he likes to go walking. He's a Foreign Office minister and he's in the Lords, not in the Commons. And that means he's got no constituency responsibilities, which means he can get away a bit more often. And he likes to go walking through the White Mountains of Crete. Have you been to Crete? It's a beautiful island. And he disappears on one of these walks. And there's a kind of hint of John Stonehouse, but I don't want to give away the plot. Thanks for that, Liam, by the way. I'm going to make you my agent, by the way. I'm sacking my agent and appointing Liam.
I'm busy, Alan.
I can do that.
But Alan,
I don't want to give away the plot.
I watched a documentary recently on John Stonehouse, and honest to goodness, if people aren't frequented with the story, you could not make it up. If you wrote it, people wouldn't believe it.
Believe it. Well, I mean, I mention it in the book because it's part of why has he disappeared. And of course, anyone beyond a certain younger than us, let's say, Eamonn, would not remember this. But he vanishes off a beach in Miami and reappears in Australia. And the only reason he was found, by the way, was a bank clerk in Australia looking out for Lord Lucan, who disappeared about the same time and suspected Stonehouse of being Lucan. But he rehabilitated himself. I mean, as a bit of a television star when he came back. So the Stonehouse story is one of the most incredible episodes in our political history.
Well, we enter a new chapter of political history as of yesterday.
And you talk about a minister being missing. Kemi Badenoch missed the start of the cabinet meeting this morning because she was late, which seems quite extraordinary not to turn up on time. You've been round that table many times before, as we mentioned, in many different respects. What's the mood? What's the sentiment going to be like?
Excitement. I mean, there's no doubt it will be excitement. I think let's give the new Prime Minister a chance. I'm not condemning her or anything, but I do think it's a bit dangerous to pack your cabinet with friends and supporters. I mean, it was an excellent minister, Greg Clark, who was at local government, had been business secretary a few years ago. He was a very, very good minister. He's gone. Why has he gone? Nothing to do with his abilities. He just backed her rival. And, I think that's probably not a good way to start. But because they're all her supporters and friends around that cabinet table, there'll be even more excitement than there normally would be. And why not? I mean, this is the start. It's not a new government, of course. It's the same government. The only people that have elected this lot is 0.29% of the population, Conservative Party members. So it's the same government, but a new leadership. And I guess, all of the excitement that goes with that, although Liz Truss is to go straight from her first cabinet into her first Prime Minister's questions, shows you how difficult it is in our system. In other systems, they'd be giving them 6 months to kind of bed in before they're put in the firing line. She'll be straight in the firing line at lunchtime.
Of the posts that you held, Alan, Health Secretary, Home Secretary, Education Secretary, which was the most challenging? Which was the most difficult? I'm looking at Teresa Coffey walking in number 10 there, and I would have thought, goodness me, what can you do with health? You look at the Home Secretary's job, what can you do with immigration? As for education, there just can never be enough money really to get it right. I mean, they're all a bit of a poison chalice, aren't they?
Well, they are at the moment. I mean, I came in as Home Secretary when crime had almost halved, domestic violence down by 64%. It was a very successful period. We had a record numbers of coppers on the streets. We had neighbourhood policing. So it doesn't have to be hard. It's hard because of what she's inheriting, but it doesn't have to be hard. And nobody in Parliament, I don't think, very few people are there who don't want one of those big cabinet jobs and all the problems that go with them. What's the hardest? The hardest job I did was I was business secretary and work and pension secretary, as well as the three you mentioned, Eamonn. The hardest was definitely Home Secretary. Suella Braverman, it's not the Ministry of Fun, but it is enormously fulfilling because you're doing such an important job. She'll now, have protection. She won't even be able to walk to the corner shop to get a newspaper without an entourage of armed guards with her. So it's a very different job to the others.
Do you think she's going to fare when it gets to Prime Minister's questions? This is a Prime Minister so different in style to Boris Johnson, but coming across and facing the same Keir Starmer. It's going to feel different.
Yeah, but I think because it's her first outing, and because no one could expect her to have, a whole series of policies to announce just yet, it'll probably be an easy ride for her. It'll be the future PMQs that are going to be more difficult for her. But hell, I was a big critic. I think Boris Johnson, there was something fundamentally unsound about him and the dishonesty about him. Well, you've lost all that. Liz Truss comes in, she's many things, but one thing she's not is dishonest, or certainly that's not been her record. So I think she gains from that. She'll take Parliament seriously. She'll take politics seriously, which her predecessor sometimes didn't.
But aren't all you politicians dishonest, Alan, when they come out with these superlatives, these big, she's saying, together we can ride out the storm. Can we? There's nothing in the coffers. We're fighting a war, Putin's war, as we say as well. We're coming out of a pandemic, which may come back to us again. I just have never known things so grim.
No, I struggle to think of a time when there are so many problems. Not all of the government's making, of course. Things like the war in Ukraine. Although, it was the government's decision to sell off our gas storage. I mean, we had storage, we had reserves. We'd be in a lot better situation. But no problem is insurmountable. Just think, Eamonn, of our parents' generation. I think for you and I, who went through a lifetime of war every 20 years, who had to come out of the war with a debt to GDP ratio of 250%. I mean, it's 99% now, and that's a problem. But they came out of that, built the health service, built, full employment in the 50s. So let's not exaggerate this. These problems are resolvable. But one thing I do agree with you is some of these trite statements. We'll ride it out. Of course we'll ride it out. Well, what's the alternative? That the country disappears? We have to ride it out. Will we ride it out in a way that does not cause further problems and resolve some of the fundamental problems? Let's say one last thing, Eamonn. Suella Braverman is going into the Home Office.
Yeah.
And the first thing we have to tackle is the people coming across illegal immigration across the Channel.
Yeah.
What is one of the fundamental reasons why they're coming to this country? You don't hear this said. Because in this country, you can come here illegally and vanish. We're one of only 2 countries in the whole of our continent that don't have an identity card system. Have a look at that, Suella. We introduced it. You abandoned it in 2010. It's an attraction to this country. You can come and live and work, and you never have to show your identity. So there's a little tip for Suella.
Okay, that's one to bear in mind. So much we could talk to you about, Alan. Just to say good luck with the book. One of our ministers is missing because it's out now. Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Okay.
I want to very quickly give a message from Mike, who's got in touch on GB Views. The party's under a microscope, spiralling towards election defeat in 2024. They've been thrown a lifeline. It's now up to them to reassure the electorate that they deserve a second chance. Or will they be able to do that? Cabinet meeting underway now. Prime Minister's questions a little bit later on. We'll bring you all the developments here on GB News.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Rosie was off the subs bench. She had put her boots on. She played a blinder this morning because Isabel was bringing her little daughter Poppy to school, her first day of primary school today. So she will be back tomorrow morning with me from 6 o'clock. Rosie, thank you very much indeed. But most of all, folks, thank you very much indeed for your company, for listening and for watching.
Up next is Tom Harwood with the briefing from Downing Street.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's more showers today. Yes, there'll be some sunny spells between the heavy downpours, but again, where we see the heavy showers, they could well turn into thunderstorms. A lot of spray and surface water on the roads this morning. Here's the reason why: a slow-moving area of low pressure just churning away just to the southwest of Ireland and throwing bands of heavy showers our way. It is a bright, sunny start for some, but if you've got blue skies, just keep an eye out the window because quite quickly this morning the cloud will start to bubble up and the showers won't be too far away. We'll have that mixture of sunshine and showers for pretty much all parts through the rest of the day. Staying fairly cloudy and wet across Shetland, but some brighter spells elsewhere. But where we see those showers, heavy downpours, thunderstorms possible, could cause a bit of disruption and potential for local flooding in a few spots. It's still quite mild, though, out there this morning, and by this afternoon, temperatures getting into the low 20s in the sunny spells. But more heavy showers to come this evening. You can see them still spiralling around. It's quite gusty winds through today and tonight across South Wales, Southwest England, and across northern Scotland. Again, it'll be a pretty mild night tonight, even with clear skies. Temperatures likely to stay in the teens, certainly in most urban areas. And again, on Thursday, it's a case of watching the downpours develop after what could be a largely fine start, certainly for southwest Scotland, northwest England. But more showers likely, I think, tomorrow across parts of Wales, the Midlands and southern England. Some more for East Anglia too, and perhaps some more persistent rain at times just affecting the east coast of Scotland, where there'll be a brisk breeze coming in from the North Sea, keeping the temperatures pegged back on the beaches here. But elsewhere again, we'll see a bit of sunshine between the showers and highs of 19 to 21 Celsius. The low pressure responsible is still with us on Friday. More heavy showers then, but it is also moving away. So it looks a lot drier for most of us by Saturday. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:30 and live from Downing Street. My name's Tom Harwood. This is the briefing on GB News. As Liz Truss's first cabinet meeting concludes, we'll bring you all the fallout and the analysis of this new administration. That's after the headlines.
Well, a very good morning. 9:31. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Liz Truss has held her first cabinet meeting as Prime Minister after a major reshuffle. Therese Coffey is among those to secure a senior role, appointed Deputy Prime Minister and Health Secretary. Kwasi Kwarteng is now Chancellor of the Exchequer. James Cleverly has been promoted to Foreign Secretary. Ben Wallace retained his position, so he's still Defence Secretary. At lunchtime, Liz Truss will go head-to-head for the first time with Sir Keir Starmer in her first Prime Minister's questions. Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News. Well, early this morning, Kemi Badenoch spoke about her new role and the future of the party.
I'm very happy with being Secretary of State for International Trade.
Can Liz Truss unite the party? It was a very divisive leadership contest.
Yes, of course she can.
Have a good day. Thank you.
The US President Joe Biden congratulated Liz Truss on her new role during their first phone call last night. Well, during the conversation, he also stressed the importance of reaching an agreement with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Well, Liz Truss also spoke to other world leaders, including Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, where she reiterated the UK's support and accepted an invitation to visit Ukraine soon. Well, meanwhile, Russia's criticised Liz Truss for not being willing to compromise. 4 men arrested in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Korbel have been released on bail. The 9-year-old was shot in her home last month. Her mother, who was also injured by the gunman, has told those responsible they need to own up. In the video appeal filmed and released by Merseyside Police, Cheryl Corbell paid tribute to her daughter.
You know you've done wrong, so you need to own up. Like I've taught my kids. You do something wrong, you own up to it.
Prince Charles will meet the parents of a teenager who died from an allergic reaction to a Pret sandwich when he hosts a global conference on allergies. The event was organised by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, set up by the parents of 15-year-old Natasha Edenhan-Labrahus. She died following a severe allergic reaction to sesame in a sandwich in 2016. We're on your TV, online and your DAB Plus radio. It's GB News. Now let's go back to number 10 and Downing Street for the briefing with Tom.
More people walking out. Good morning and live from Downing Street, welcome to the briefing. The first cabinet meeting of Liz Truss, the first of her premiership, has concluded and already